Chapter 35:20. 6. In Tribulations. When Nyetian heard the man's words, his face suddenly sank, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He didn't mean to make things difficult for anyone. Wenren Xiang's words were indeed a bit reckless, but this was only a conversation between her and Nyetian. It had nothing to do with others. If you don't like it, you can laugh at it. Nyetian doesn't care. But that black-robed martial artist was very arrogant. He asked Nyetian to roll over and kowtow to him, which made Nyetian unable to accept. Nyetian took a step forward and wanted to walk over, but he was stopped by Wenren Xiang, who shook her head, making Nyetian become cold. Nyetian frowned. His eyes swept across the people in the restaurant, and finally suppressed the anger in his heart. He didn't say anything and directly turned to leave. After all, he had just arrived at the Wolf Knight City. It was not good to have a conflict with others. Ha ha! I thought you had some backbone, but it turns out you're just a coward. You want to be the leader of the Wolf Knight City with your cowardly appearance. Really funny. When the crowd saw that Nyetian was about to leave, they all laughed, treating him as a coward. Brat, didn't you hear what Sixth Master said just now? However, at this time, that black-robed martial artist didn't intend to let Nyetian leave. He sneered, suddenly turned around, and a pair of eyes like a vicious wolf firmly stared at Nyetian. I didn't hear anyone speak, only a mad dog barking in front of me. Nyetian looked at that black-robed martial artist and replied with a cold smile. This black-robed martial artist looked very young, but his strength had already reached the 9th layer of Heavenly Charm Realm, and the aura around him was very strong. Even compared to Su Kuanga, it was not weaker. At such a young age, with such strength, this person was very likely to be the same as Su Kuanga, also one of the 9 wolves. Brat, what did you say? When that person heard Nyetian's words, his eyes suddenly turned cold. His entire body surged with a strange and evil aura, incomparably gloomy. What a terrifying aura! Everyone felt the fluctuation of the aura in the void, and their expressions changed. They were shocked. In the next moment, someone recognized the black-robed cultivator. His eyes trembled as he exclaimed, He's the Een 6 Tribulation. Een 6 Tribulation. Everyone's expression suddenly changed. The way they looked at the black-robed martial artist instantly changed, and they were extremely fearful. Who would have thought that this unassuming black-robed martial artist turned out to be the #1 genius of the 7 Wolves mercenary group, Een Liujia? Just like Su Kuanga, he was also one of the Wolf Knight 9 wolves. It turned out that the genius everyone was talking about was right in front of them. Looks like the 6th Master's name is quite famous. Een Liujia swept his gaze across the crowd with a smug look on his face. Clearly, he enjoyed the surprise of the crowd very much. Then he locked his gaze on Nyetian again and said in a cold tone, Brat, hurry up and kowtow and admit your mistake before the 6th Master gets angry. What if I don't? The corner of Nyetian's mouth twitched. With a calm face, he asked with a faint smile, 6th Master, I don't want to kill anyone today. Don't force me. Een Liujia stretched out a hand and clenched it in the air like a wolf's claw. He said in a cold tone, what he cultivated was the 7 Wolves' ultimate kill. In the entire 7 Wolves mercenary group, apart from the leader, he was the only one who cultivated it. Therefore, he was known as the #1 genius of the 7 Wolves mercenary group, and was also considered to be the next leader of the 7 Wolves mercenary group. Nyetian had heard the conversation of the crowd just now, so he was very clear about Een Liujia's identity. But at this moment, he was not afraid at all. Brat, come and kowtow. Een Liujia smiled coldly, raised his chin, and said. The crowd looked at Nyetian with blazing eyes, obviously ready to watch a good show. Idiot! Nyetian sneered and turned around, completely ignoring Een Liujia. You're courting death. Een Liujia's eyes darkened. A cold light flashed in his eyes as he roared. Then, like a vicious wolf, he struck out with his palm towards Nyetian. In this restaurant, there was a large formation protecting it. Een Liujia did not dare to release too much power. Otherwise, it would trigger the killing intent of the large formation. Nyetian, be careful. Seeing this, Wen Rinxiang was so scared that her beautiful face turned pale and she screamed. As one of the 9 wolves, Yin Liujia's strength could be imagined. If he was hit by his palm, Nie Tian would definitely be seriously injured. Bang! However, at this moment, Nie Tian directly turned around and did not dodge at all. He also struck out with his palm. Suddenly, the 2 palms collided, making a muffled sound like metal and stone, causing a fluctuation in the void. Immediately, Yin Liujia's figure took a few steps back and almost fell to the ground, looking very embarrassed. On the other hand, Nie Tian was like an old tree rooted to the ground, not moving at all. How is this possible? The scene in front of them made the crowd unable to believe it and exclaimed in unison. Who would have thought that Yin Liujia's sudden attack was not only blocked by Nie Tian, but also pushed back several meters? It was really incredible. One must know that Yin Liujia was a 9th level Heavenly Aura martial artist, while Nie Tian was only at the 2nd level of Heavenly Aura. Moreover, Yin Liujia's 7 Wolves ultimate kill had greatly improved his martial body. It was simply too illusory for him to be defeated by Nie Tian at such a close distance. In fact, if Nie Tian attacked with all his strength just now, he could at least seriously injure Yin Liujia, if not kill him. On the one hand, he was afraid of the large formation in the space, and, on the other hand, he didn't want to get into trouble. After all, Yin Liujia was one of the 9 wolves and had a special status in the 7 wolves mercenary group. If he was injured, he would probably be hunted down by the 7 wolves mercenary group. Kid, how come you're so strong? Yin Liujia asked in surprise as he stabilized his body and looked at Nie Tian in shock. It's not that I'm too strong, it's that you're too weak. Nie Tianling sneered and then turned around again, ready to leave. He didn't want to waste time on Yin Liujia. It was better to leave as soon as possible. You want to leave just like that? Dream on. Yin Liujia's eyes were gloomy and murderous at this time. He spoke in a cold tone, and the aura of his whole body began to surge. Yin Liujia can't be thinking of fighting here, right? The crowd trembled when they saw this scene and couldn't help but become nervous. If Yin Liujia attacked with all his strength, he would definitely trigger the large formation, and then everyone present would suffer. Nie Tian felt Yin Liujia's aura and couldn't help but narrow his eyes, and his face became gloomy. There was no grudge between him and Yin Liujia. At most, it was just a quarrel, but Yin Liujia's posture clearly showed that he wanted to kill him. In the next moment, if Yin Liujia attacked with all his strength, then Nie Tian could only fight with all his strength. Yin Liujia, are you crazy? How dare you fight here? At this moment, a vigorous voice sounded, and then a figure in white descended from the sky and appeared in front of everyone. When Nie Tian heard this voice, his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He then looked at the figure in white. It was Su Kuanga. Su Kuanga! Yin Liujia's eyes darkened. He stared at Su Kuanga and called out the latter's name in a cold manner. Su Kuanga! He's Su Kuanga! Everyone was stunned when they heard this name. They immediately turned around and looked at Su Kuanga. Chapter 35:21. Chapter 35:16. Chapter 35:16. Wolf King Su Kuanga looked at Nie Tian and faintly smiled. Although he remained calm, his eyes were blazing with excitement. Nie Tian's appearance made him inexplicably excited. Perhaps it was because he lost to Nie Tian last time, so he was very unwilling and wanted to win back. Su Kuanga actually knows this kid. The crowd looked at Su Kuanga with a horrified expression. They didn't expect Nie Tian and Su Kuanga to know each other. Moreover, from Su Kuanga's reaction, he seemed to be very familiar with Nie Tian. Su Kuanga was one of the 9 wolves, a peak genius of Wolf's Night Mountain. How could he know a second-layer heaven rhythm martial artist? Brother Su. Nie Tian looked at Su Kuanga and faintly smiled in response. He also didn't expect Su Kuanga to appear at this time. Su Kuanga, you know this kid? At this time, Yin Liujia stared at Su Kuanga with a pair of cold eyes and coldly asked, Brother Yin, give me some face and let this matter end here. Su Kuanga didn't answer Yin Liujia, but said with a faint smile. Yin Liujia's face was gloomy as he said, I'm sorry, your face isn't big enough. So you want to fight here? Su Kwanga couldn't help but frown and ask cold. Su Kwanga, this is a matter between me and him. You better not interfere. In Liujia replied cold. His eyes were filled with killing intent. He couldn't wait to eat Nietian alive. What if I must interfere? The corner of Su Kwanga's mouth twitched as he pondered. Huh? In Liujia's face sank, and his eyes became even more gloomy. Su Kwanga's words were almost directly provoking him. When the crowd saw this scene, their eyes couldn't help but become blazing with excitement. Su Kwanga and In Liujia were both recognized as super geniuses of the Nine Wolves. Even among the geniuses discussed by the crowd just now, the two of them were also strong competitors for the Night Wolf's leader. If these two were to fight, there would be a good show to watch. Su Kwanga, for this kid, you want to fall out with me? In Liujia was silent for a long time. Then, he calmed down a lot and said solemnly, You and I have never been friends, let alone falling out with each other. If you must fight, I, Su, will accompany you to the end. Su Kwanga laughed and lightly said, You're going too far. After hearing Su Kwanga's words, In Liujia's eyes couldn't help but tremble. He let out a low roar and his aura surged crazily, hitting the void. Suddenly, the space shook and a hidden force began to move. Damn it! Nietian's face darkened as he sensed the power of the spell formation in the air. Damn it! If In Liujia really attacked with all his strength and activated the power of the formation, everyone present would probably suffer. Is In Liujia crazy? Everyone also felt the bursts of fluctuations in the void and couldn't help but retreat, looking at In Liujia in horror. In Liujia, don't think that you can be so arrogant just because you're from the Seven Wolves mercenary group. Su Kwanga wasn't afraid at this time. Instead, he let out a low roar and a fierce spear aura surged from his body, hitting the void. Both of them were geniuses and were equally crazy. I'll kill you. In Liujia's eyes darkened, and in a very violent manner, he directly struck out with his palm. Suddenly, a terrifying wolf claw appeared in the void and crazily pressed towards Su Kwanga. Humph! Su Kwanga didn't give in and sneered. A spear aura burst out and confronted In Liujia head-on. Although these two guys looked very arrogant on the surface, they each had a sense of propriety and didn't use their full strength. Bang! In the next moment, two terrifying forces collided head-on. Suddenly, a muffled sound came out in the air, and a violent force surged out. Boom! 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 In the next moment, the space suddenly shook, and then a violent and murderous force of the formation was released, whistling and surging, as if it wanted to annihilate everything. The crowd's expression changed dramatically, and they all retreated, wanting to escape. But unfortunately, the power of the formation had sealed the space. Under the huge pressure, it was impossible for them to escape. Stop! At this moment, a low voice sounded at this moment. Boom! Immediately, a huge force fell and actually dissolved the power of the formation like a spring breeze and rain. Everyone felt the pressure from the space disappear, and their expressions suddenly changed. They then looked towards the direction of the voice and saw a majestic middle-aged man standing there, coldly staring at them. This person's strength is so strong. Nietian frowned and looked at the middle-aged man in shock. The power that the middle-aged man used just now was clearly the power of the Heavenly Mandate Realm. To be able to control the power of the Heavenly Mandate Realm so freely, it showed that this person's strength was definitely close to the peak of the Heavenly Mandate Realm. The next moment, Nietian's divine sense swept over, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. The middle-aged man's strength was indeed at the 9th level of the Heavenly Mandate Realm. The 9th level of the Heavenly Mandate Realm was definitely a peak expert in the entire sacred world of 7th cultivators. With such strength, this middle-aged man's status in the Wolf's Night Mountain was definitely not low. In Liujia, Su Kwanga, how dare you fight here? At this time, the man spoke in a cold tone with a pair of incomparably gloomy eyes. Suddenly, the scene was dead silent, and the atmosphere was oppressive. Su Kwanga and In Liujia both didn't speak. Only this time, no next time. After a moment, the middle-aged man spoke in a cold tone with a hint of killing intent in his eyes. If two ordinary warriors were to cause trouble here, he would definitely kill them without hesitation. However, Su Kuanga and Liujia were, after all, 9 wolves, so he couldn't kill them so casually. At this time, the middle-aged man's eyes were a bit strange as he stared at Su Kuanga for a long time. Su Kuanga didn't speak, and even deliberately avoided the middle-aged man. "You can leave now." The middle-aged man frowned and said in a deep voice, "Thank you, sir." Liujia bowed slightly, and then glanced at Nye Tian and Su Kuanga. He said in a cold tone, "Let's wait and see." Nye Tian faintly smiled and didn't respond. After Liujia left, Nye Tian didn't stay and directly left the restaurant. Su Kuanga also followed him out. "Brother Su, who was the one who attacked just now?" Nye Tian looked at Su Kuanga and couldn't help but ask. "He is one of the 9 wolf kings of the evil moon heavenly wolf, Su Cheng." Su Kuanga nodded and said in a deep voice, "Wolf King." Nye Tian's eyes narrowed and he was surprised. No wonder that person was so powerful, so he was the Wolf King. Nye Tian saw Su Kuanga's expression and couldn't help but frown. Could it be that the latter had some relationship with Su Cheng? "Brother Nye, this is your first time coming to Wolf Night City. How about I take you around?" At this time, Su Kuanga recovered and said with some excitement, "All right." Nye Tian nodded. He still hadn't thought of how to save Duanmu Lu and the others. It was better to follow Su Kuanga and inquire about some information. Then, under Su Kuanga's lead, Nye Tian and Wenren Xiang began to stroll around Wolf Night City. Chapter 35:22. Chapter 35:17. Killing a heavenly wolf guard. "Brother Nye, are you all right?" Su Kuanga saw that Nye Tian's expression was a little abnormal and couldn't help but frown and ask, "Ning Ziyu?" Nye Tian's expression was tense. His eyes suddenly trembled and he exclaimed in his heart. He simply couldn't believe that the familiar aura that he sensed at this moment was actually Ning Ziyu's. Over there. In the next moment, Nye Tian's expression changed. His figure immediately moved and madly ran towards the other side of the street. "Brother Nye." Su Kuanga was stunned. He didn't know what was going on. After shouting, he immediately chased after him. Wenren Xiang reacted and also chased after him. Nye Tian was in the air, like a ray of light, madly running towards a narrow alley. "Damn girl, let's see where you can run now." Before he arrived, he heard a loud shout from afar. At the same time, in a small alley, several black-clothed people came to the entrance of the alley and directly activated a large formation, sealing the entire alley. And at the end of the alley, a petite figure was subconsciously retreating, but behind her, there was no way out. Her body was dripping with blood. Her face was covered in blood, but from the general outline, it could still be seen that this was a peerlessly beautiful face. She was none other than Ning Ziyu. "Little girl, you're really something to actually be able to escape here." At this time, a black-clothed person walked over, a pair of eyes as gloomy as killing intent, approaching step by step. What are you guys doing?" Ning Ziyu's small face was extremely shocked. Her eyes trembled. It was obvious that she was extremely frightened. "What do you think?" The black-clothed person took a step forward, like a vicious wolf, directly pouncing over. "No." Ning Ziyu was frightened and shouted loudly, her hands covering her head. "Die." At this moment, a low voice suddenly rang out in the air. After that, a powerful force descended, causing the entire space to sink. Bang! In the next moment, that black-clothed person didn't even have the time to react. He was directly crushed in a meat paste by the violent force. Following that, a gap appeared on the grand formation, and a figure fell from it. Like a sharp sword, that figure was stabbed into the ground. Nye Tian. Ning Ziyu suddenly felt a familiar aura. She opened her eyes and saw a familiar figure in front of her. Her face stiffened, and she let out a cry in a daze. Tears fell from her eyes uncontrollably. "It's fine now." Nye Tian turned around and glanced at Ning Ziyu. His eyes flashed coldly as he spoke in a low voice. Then, His gaze swept across the black-robed men with killing intent. Stinky brat, you really are daring, actually killing a sky wolf guard. The black-robed men had been startled by Niet Tion's sudden appearance. Furthermore, Niet Tion's viciousness had caused their hearts to tremble with fear. Now that they had recovered, they weren't afraid at all. The ones who will kill you. Niet Tion's eyes darkened. A cold light flashed across his eyes, and he immediately moved. Several sword intents whizzed out at the same time. They were extremely sharp, as if they could even tear the sky and earth apart. The black-robed men didn't even have time to react and died on the spot. Not even their bones were left. These people were all Heaven Rhyme Stage 5 martial artists, but in front of Niet Tion, they couldn't fight back at all. Niet Tion. At this time, Ningxiu looked at Niet Tion and suddenly burst into tears. She threw herself into his arms. Niet Tion frowned and comforted Ningxiu to calm her down. Niet Tion. At this time, Su Kuanga and Wenren Xiang arrived and looked at Niet Tion and Ningxiu in surprise. You. Ningxiu was startled when she saw Wenren Xiang. She pointed at the latter in fear. I'm sorry. Wenren Xiang, of course, knew why Ningxiu was so scared. She lowered her head and apologized. It's okay, she won't hurt you. Niet Tion nodded slightly, indicating for Ningxiu to calm down. Niet Tion, did you just kill someone? At this time, Su Kuanga looked at Niet Tion and asked in shock. He smelled the blood in the air. Yes. Niet Tion nodded. Don't tell me you killed the Sky Wolf Guards? Su Kuanga frowned and asked in shock. Yes. Niet Tion nodded again. Before those black-robed men died, they indeed called themselves Sky Wolf Guards. Oh no! Su Kuanga's face darkened and his eyes flashed. He was actually very panicked. Niet Tion frowned and asked, Is there a problem? Let's not talk about this for now. Let's leave this place first. Su Kuanga said anxiously. Then, they immediately left. They found a nearby restaurant and asked for a few rooms. Niet Tion told Wenren Xiang to take care of Ningxiu. He wanted to wait for Ningxiu to completely calm down before asking her what happened. Niet Tion and Su Kuanga were in another room. Both of their expressions were not very good. Brother Su, who are those Sky Wolf Guards? Niet Tion looked at Su Kuanga and asked in a deep voice. They are evil Moon Wolf's people. Su Kuanga said in a deep voice, No one has ever dared to kill a Sky Wolf Guard in Wolf Knight City. If this matter is leaked out, it will be troublesome. They really are evil Moon Wolf's people. Niet Tion frowned, and his expression became gloomy. He had already guessed that those black-robed men were evil Moon Wolf's people. Although Su Kuanga was very nervous at this time, in his eyes, killing a few Sky Wolf Guards was not a big deal. Moreover, he had handled it very cleanly. No one would know. I hope no one saw it. Su Kuanga nodded and then looked at Niet Tion and asked, Brother Nya, who is that girl? A friend of mine. Niet Tion thought for a moment and slightly nodded. Then, he simply told Su Kuanga about Ningxiu and the others. So that's how it is. After Su Kuanga heard Niet Tion's story, he frowned and said with a face full of indignation, You won the Ice and Fire Springs for Forest Wolf City. I didn't expect the Forest Wolf City Lord to give your friend to evil Moon Wolf's people. He really repaid kindness with enmity. Niet Tion's face was gloomy, and he did not say anything. After a moment, Wenren Xiang and Ningxiu came to the room. Ningxiu had calmed down a lot. Her injuries had healed a lot, but there was an obvious mark on her face. It was actually an extremely glaring word, slave. The word slave carved on her face represented that she was the lowest and lowest existence. Damn it! Niet Tion looked at the word on Ningxiu's face. His eyes trembled violently, and his fists were clenched. Evil Moon Wolf's people had actually turned Ningxiu and the others into wolf slaves. The word slave was obviously carved by a special power. There was a rune aura on it. It was not easy to get rid of it. Niet Tion, I'm fine. Ningxiu was very calm at this time. She was just a little anxious and said, Quickly go and save Duanmu and the others. Where are they? Niet Tion's eyes darkened as he asked in surprise. In the wolf slave market. Ningxiu nodded and said, Chapter 35-23. Wolf Slave Farm. What kind of place is that? Nietion's eyes trembled as he looked at Ning Ziyu and Su Kuanga. I don't know. I was brought there by them. Ning Ziyu shook her head awkwardly. I just heard from the people there that it's a wolf slave farm. Do you still remember where the wolf slave farm is? Nietion frowned and asked nervously. Yeah. Ning Ziyu nodded and looked at Nietion. Let's go save Duanmu. I'm afraid they'll die if we're late. Calm down. Nietion took a deep breath and motioned for Ning Ziyu to calm down. Right now, he wanted to save people more than Ning Ziyu. But first, he had to figure out what was going on. Then, Ning Ziyu briefly explained what happened after Nietion left. After Nietion left, Wenren two-handed Ning Ziyu and the others over to Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf's people. Then, they were brought to the wolf slave farm in Wolf Night City. Ning Ziyu was locked up in a wolf cage for a few days. When the guards weren't paying attention, she sneaked out and was chased. Then, Nietion showed up. You're lying. But after Ning Ziyu finished, Su Kuanga's face darkened. You're only a peak paramount god. How could you escape from the wolf slave farm? He said cold. The wolf slave farm was one of the most heavily guarded places in Wolf Night City. It was even guarded by a wolf king. Ning Ziyu was only a peak paramount god. There was no way she could escape from the wolf slave farm. Not to mention Ning Ziyu. Even Su Kuanga and Nietion with their strength would not be able to escape after being caught and thrown into the wolf slave farm. I'm not lying. Ning Ziyu stared at Su Kuanga and argued for herself. Since you're not lying, then tell me, how did you escape? Su Kuanga didn't back down and asked cold. I have my own way. Ning Ziyu frowned as if she had something she couldn't say. What is your method? Can't you let us know? Su Kuanga frowned and continued to ask. Ning Ziyu's expression was ugly. She was speechless for a moment. Say no more. I believe you. At this moment, Nietion looked at Ning Ziyu and said solemnly, Let's go to the wolf slave farm now. Ning Ziyu was taken aback. Her eyes welled up with tears as she nodded heavily. Nietion, are you really going to the wolf slave farm? Do you know where that place is? Su Kuanga stepped forward and stopped Nietion, asking with a panicked expression. No matter how dangerous it is, I must go. Nietion nodded. His voice was not loud, but it was filled with determination. Duanmu Lu and the others were in the wolf slave market. He must go. All right, I'll go with you. Su Kuanga looked at Nietion and felt the firmness in the latter's eyes. In the end, he could only nod and said solemnly, Thank you. The corner of Nietion's mouth twitched, but he did not refuse. The wolf slave farm was a dangerous place. If Su Kuanga followed him, he would have a helper at the critical moment. All right, let's go now. Nietion did not delay and immediately prepared to go to the wolf slave farm. Wait a minute. But at this time, Su Kuanga suddenly spoke. He paused for a moment and hesitated for a long time before finally taking out a token and handing it over to Wenren Xiang. Wenren Xiang took the token and saw the word Su written on it. She could not help but be puzzled, not knowing what Su Kuanga meant. This is the Su family's intersect token. Take it and find the person who stopped me from fighting with Yin Liujie in the restaurant. Tell him that I'm going to the wolf slave farm. Su Kuanga looked at Wenren Xiang and said solemnly, Wolf King Su Cheng. Wenren Xiang frowned. She did not expect Su Kuanga to ask her to find the Wolf King at this time. Could it be that there was some relationship between Su Kuanga and Su Cheng? Brother Su, do you know the Wolf King? Nietion was also stunned and could not help but ask. You go. Su Kuanga did not explain and said solemnly, This. Wenren Xiang's pretty face froze as she looked at Nietion. Nietion nodded. Wenren Xiang agreed and immediately left. Nietion did not know the relationship between Su Kuanga and the Wolf King Su Cheng. Since Su Kuanga asked Wenren Xiang to inform Su Cheng, it was enough to prove that Su Kuanga had a certain amount of trust in Su Cheng. Then, Nietion and the others did not stop and immediately went to the wolf slave farm. Half a day later, they arrived at a remote place far away from the city center. Nietion saw from afar that there was a strange-looking castle in the open space in front of him. It was very grand, comparable to the imperial palace. Nietion, this is the wolf slave farm. Su Kuanga looked at the castle in the distance and said solemnly, Ning Ziyu slightly nodded. Coming to this place again made her a little nervous. Ning Ziyu, you go into the 9 superbs first, Nia Tian said, and let Ning Ziyu hide in the 9 superbs. She could not help much anyway, and might even become a burden to Nia Tian and Su Kuanga. Then, Nia Tian and Su Kuanga walked towards the wolf slave farm. Stop! At the entrance, they were stopped by 2 guards in black. Nia Tian glanced at the 2 guards and was secretly surprised. The strength of these 2 guards were actually at the first level of the Heavenly Mandate Realm. We are warriors participating in the Wolf Night competition. We're just going in to take a look. Su Kuanga seemed very careful. He took out the Wolf Knight token and several top-grade sacred crystals and handed them to the 2 guards. Nia Tian also took out the Wolf Knight token and showed it to the 2 guards. You can only watch from the outside. You cannot enter the inner field, understand? The 2 guards said with a gloomy and cold face. Su Kuanga nodded and entered the wolf slave farm with Nia Tian. As soon as he stepped into the wolf slave field, Nia Tian sensed the smell of blood assaulting his senses. Even someone like him, who was used to seeing killings, still felt that the smell of blood was extremely unpleasant. At the same time, he felt that the entire wolf slave farm was filled with a strong aura of a boundary. It was obviously protected by a boundary. Then, the 2 entered the outer field of the wolf slave farm and saw a huge martial arts arena in the distance. It looked like a coliseum, and the surrounding viewing area was full of people. Nia Tian frowned. He did not expect there to be so many people here. Nia Tian, these people came from other places in the 7th Sacred Cultivator's world. Basically, they directly teleported here through the space-time grand formation. Most of them are from big families and forces, and they came here to play. Su Kuanga saw Nia Tian's doubts and said in a heavy voice, "These people can only stay in the wolf slave farm and are not allowed to leave. If they get tired of playing, they can teleport back through the space-time grand formation." So that's how it is. Nia Tian frowned, and his face was gloomy. These people are interesting, coming all the way to the wolf slave farm to play. Nia Tian and Su Kuanga directly walked towards a martial arts arena. Chapter 35:24. Chapter 35:19. Chapter 35:19 entered the arena. In person, Nia Tian looked at the scene in the arena and could not help but frown. That's a battlefield. There's a strong barrier there, and the martial artists Yuan Meridians are completely suppressed. They can't use any martial skills, and can only use their physical bodies to resist. Su Kuanga looked at Nia Tian and said in a heavy tone, "These people have seen enough of ordinary fights. They all want to see martial artists fight like wild beasts without using martial skills." Nia Tian's eyes darkened. He used his divine sense to probe the battlefield, and sure enough, he discovered that the battlefield was enveloped by a powerful barrier. These people were really perverted. They actually liked to watch such bloody battles. On the other side, Nia Tian saw that in the other arenas, the space was even larger. The cultivators in them were fighting directly. Those arenas are all ordinary arenas. They are divided into over-god arenas, demi-saints arenas, demi-saints arenas, pseudo-saints arenas, saints arenas, and saints arenas. Su Kuanga pointed to an arena in the distance and solemnly explained, "These arenas are for ordinary martial artists to fight. Different arenas only allow martial artists with corresponding strength to participate." Are these people fighting wolf slaves? Nia Tian frowned. He saw that most of the cultivators fighting had the word slave tattooed on their faces, just like Ning Ziyu. Most of them are wolf slaves, but there are also a few other warriors. Su Kuanga nodded slightly and said, "There are some who are not satisfied with watching and could also enter the arena to fight. However, they are not restricted by the arena, and even heavenly rhythm saints could enter the arena for demi-saints to fight." When Nia Tian heard what Su Kuanga said, he couldn't help but frown. His face became gloomy. If a heavenly charm holy apostle were to enter the pseudo-saint sanctuary or the demi-saint sanctuary, would that not be a massacre? Even an extreme prodigy like Nia Tian would find it difficult to fight against a heavenly charm holy disciple when he was at the pseudo-holy disciple rank. If these people want to personally participate, they have to pay a huge fee to appear. In fact, they're just spending money to kill people. Su Kwanga smiled bitterly and said, "Many people from big families like to bring their young juniors here and let them go on a killing spree in order to train their martial heart." Nietion's face was gloomy, and he didn't say anything. Using this method to train the heart of martial arts was simply a joke. Whether one's heart of martial arts was tenacious or not had little to do with whether or not he had killed people or how many people he had killed. Many people who were addicted to killing, when faced with someone stronger than them, would also be so frightened that their knees would weaken and they would kneel and beg for mercy. Some people who had never killed before also had unyielding pride. After a moment, Nietion frowned and asked in a deep voice, "Where did so many wolf slaves come from?" Most of the wolf slaves were captured by Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf from other places in the seventh sacred world of cultivators. There are also some who came to Night Wolf Mountain and were forcibly captured as wolf slaves, Su Kwanga said in a heavy tone. Nietion's eyes darkened. Duanmu Lu and the others were forcibly captured as wolf slaves. Once the word slave is engraved on these wolf slaves, they are basically finished. Su Kwanga sighed and continued, "The battle between wolf slaves is basically a battle of life and death. Whether it is a battlefield or an ordinary battlefield, the weak are prey to the strong. Only the strong can survive. The best outcome for a wolf slave is to be fancied by someone and be bought. However, the price of a wolf slave is very high. Ordinary people simply cannot afford it. After all, the sacred world is so big and there are so many martial artists. There is no lack of geniuses." Nietion frowned, and his complexion became even more gloomy. If Duanmu Lu and the others had already participated in the battle, then it would be bad. Even if Duanmu Lu and the others could keep winning, there was still a possibility that they would be bought. Damn it! Nietion roared in his heart and secretly blamed himself for not coming here earlier. Kill! 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 Kill him! At this time, a tsunami-like shout suddenly resounded outside the arena. Nietion's eyes darkened as he looked over. In the arena, a wolf slave had already been beaten to the ground and could not stand up. He covered his head with both hands and begged for mercy. Another wolf slave, watching from the side, was hesitating whether to kill him or not. He might not want to kill him, but the shouts of the crowd around him forced him to do so. If he did not do so, then he would suffer the most severe punishment and might even be killed. Don't kill me. I beg you, don't kill me." The wolf slave who had fallen to the ground was still begging for mercy, hoping that he could live. However, the other wolf slave suddenly let out a low growl, took a step forward, and punched out. The wolf slave who was begging for mercy immediately turned into a pool of blood. Good. All right. Immediately, the crowd outside the martial arena erupted into a thunderous roar. Nietion's brows furrowed, his expression extremely unsightly. These people were almost twisted perverts. They would not be satisfied until they saw someone die. The wolf slave who had won looked at the crowd around him, his eyes slightly trembling. He was also somewhat excited, and his killing habits seemed to have been stimulated. Damned wolf slave, Doc. However, at this time, a deep voice rang out. Then, a martial artist in luxurious clothes appeared and landed on the arena. Su Kwanga frowned and couldn't help but exclaim, "Someone entered the arena." Nietion's eyes narrowed, and his divine sense swept towards the martial artist in luxurious clothes. This was a young martial artist, probably only about 100 years old, but his strength was already at the third step of the half-step saint realm. And the wolf slave standing in front of him was only a late-stage paramount god. Such a gap in strength was like the difference between heaven and earth. Nietion frowned. This martial artist in luxurious clothes was the kind of person that Su Kwanga had mentioned. He was not satisfied with watching and had personally entered the arena. However, this martial artist in luxurious clothes was obviously not restricted by the arena and had come to the Supreme God Arena with the strength of a half-step saint. What do you want?" The wolf slave clearly did not understand the situation and did not expect that a half-step saint would suddenly appear. "Kill you." The martial artist in luxurious clothes sneered, and then his figure moved. The wolf slave did not even have the time to react, and was directly killed. A tragic death. Good, good, good. Outside the arena, there was another burst of cheers. The crowd was incomparably fanatical, and they loved to see the scene of killing. Su Kwanga shook his head and said, "Nyetian, let's find your friend." Okay, Nyetian agreed, and no longer paid attention to the battle. His ability was limited, and the number of people he could save was also limited. Everyone had their own path, and he only came here to save Duanmu Lu and the others. Next, Nyetian and Su Kwanga searched the arenas one by one. There were tens of thousands of arenas here, and Nyetian mainly looked for the main god arena and the supreme god arena. He searched dozens of supreme god arenas, but still did not find Duanmu Lu and the others. At this time, Nyetian suddenly sensed a familiar sword intent aura, and his eyes couldn't help but narrow. In the next moment, he followed the sword intent aura and arrived outside an arena. In the distance, he saw two martial artists standing in the arena, and they were fighting fiercely. Chapter 35:25. Chapter 35:20. Chapter 35:28 Extremities Kun Wadwanmu. Nyetian looked at the figure on the martial arena. His pupils suddenly constricted as he cried out in alarm. He had finally found Duanmu Lu. Nyetian, is that person your friend? Su Kwanga saw that Nyetian's complexion suddenly changed. Following the latter's gaze, he saw Duanmu Lu and asked in a deep voice. Yes. Nyetian nodded and said, I want to save him. Nyetian, don't be impulsive. This is the wolf slave field. There are many strong warriors here. Su Kwanga noticed that Nyetian was somewhat excited and nervously said, in the entire wolf slave farm, there are countless Tianyun cultivators as well as many heavenly mandate cultivators. There were even many shadow guards and a wolf king standing guard. If Nyetian wanted to rescue them by force, it would be impossible. Yeah, Nyetian nodded, his eyebrows furrowed. He was very anxious, but he still maintained his calm. If he forcefully made a move, the chance of saving Duanmu Lu was very small. More importantly, he only saw Duanmu Lu. He did not see any other disciples. Nyetian's gaze was low as he locked his attention onto the arena. Duanmu Lu was fighting a wolf slave who was on the same level as Duanmu Lu, a peak paramount god. At this time, Nyetian could only hope that Duanmu Lu would win this match. This was because a battle between wolf slaves was a battle of life and death. Therefore, between Duanmu Lu and his opponent, only one of them could survive. Kill. At this time, the wolf slave growled and struck out with his palm. A terrifying wave of air appeared in the void, rolling like the sea. Like a raging wild beast, it pressed towards Duanmu Lu. Obviously, this wolf slave had been a peak paramount god for a long time, which explained why he was so much stronger than Duanmu Lu. Although Duanmu Lu was a peak paramount god, and on the verge of breaking through to the half-sage level, he had only reached that level with the help of Nyetian. Most importantly, as a peak paramount god, he didn't have any real fighting experience. Therefore, it would be a bit of a stretch for him to actually fight. Buzz. In the martial arts arena, a heavy sword appeared in Duanmu Lu's hand. It was his Yuan Ling sword, the 8 Extremities Kunwu. A low sword hum sounded, and the sword was released. It surged out, and the majestic sword shadow whistled in the air with a domineering aura. Boom! In the next moment, the two forces collided, and a low rumbling sound came from the void. Bang! Bang! Duanmu Lu and the wolf slave both retreated at the same time due to the impact of the terrifying power. After that, they both unleashed a few more moves and were evenly matched. Nyetian's brow was furrowed, and he looked even more nervous than when he was fighting on his own. However, he could tell that Duanmu Lu was very smart. He was intentionally holding back his strength, hoping to familiarize himself with his opponent. I'm going to take your life with my next fist strike. You son of a bitch. At this moment, the wolf slave seemed to be enraged. With a roar, he punched out. The violent force of the punch blasted out and actually condensed into a storm in the void, strangling towards Duanmu Lu. "This is the end," Yang Qi said. Duanmu Lu's expression darkened, but he didn't seem the least bit afraid. Mouth twisting into a cold smile, he unleashed the power of the 8 extremities Kunwu sword will. Rumble. In the next moment, the terrifying sword will converged, and a terrifying sword projection appeared. Sword light spread out for tens of thousands of meters, filled with killing intent. How is this possible? The wolf slave suddenly felt the terrifying suppressive power and couldn't help but cry out. He obviously didn't expect that Duanmu Lu could burst out such a terrifying power in an instant. Then, the wolf slave didn't have time to react and was directly submerged by the sword projection. Not even his bones were left. Good, good, good. The crowd looked at the bloody scene and let out hysterical roars, extremely fanatical. However, Niet Tian frowned, and his face didn't relax at all. Duanmu Lu won this battle, but it only meant that he was temporarily safe. However, no one knew what kind of enemy he would encounter next. Teacher. At this moment, Duanmu Lu suddenly raised his head and saw Niet Tian. His eyes trembled with surprise. He never expected that Niet Tian would come. Yes. Niet Tian looked at Duanmu Lu and nodded, his eyes firm and calm. Damn wolf slave, your strength isn't bad. Let this young master have a taste of it. At this moment, a low and murderous voice suddenly sounded out from the sky, and then a figure descended from the sky and descended heavily onto the arena. Niet Tian's eyes suddenly sank, and his expression suddenly changed. The figure that suddenly appeared on the mountain of the arena turned out to be the young martial artist in luxurious clothes. Not too long ago, he had killed a peak paramount god wolf slave. Oh no! Su Kuanga's eyes trembled when he saw that person, and he cried out in alarm. The martial artist in luxurious clothes was not a wolf slave, so he wasn't restricted by the martial arts arena. That person was a third-stage half-saint, but he could appear in the paramount god martial arena. With Duanmu Lu's strength, it was impossible for him to fight against this martial artist in luxurious clothes. Niet Tian, calm down. Su Kuanga felt that something was wrong with Niet Tian's eyes, so he quickly stepped forward, pulled the ladder, and said, "Don't make a move unless it's absolutely necessary." Niet Tian's posture clearly showed that he wanted to directly intervene in the battle of the arena, which was a taboo of the wolf slave farm. There was once a disciple of an aristocratic family who rashly intervened in the battle of the arena and was directly killed by the people of the wolf slave farm. In the wolf slave farm, no matter who you were, you must abide by the rules. Niet Tian's face was gloomy, and his eyes were locked on the martial artist in luxurious clothes. If Duanmu Lu was in danger, he would definitely intervene. Even if he angered the entire wolf slave farm, he didn't care. Su Kuanga frowned and looked around, obviously waiting for someone. He was waiting for Wolf King Su Cheng, and if the latter was willing to come, perhaps there would be a turning point. Boy, you're a good swordsman and very talented. On the arena, the martial artist in luxurious clothes stared coldly at Duanmu Lu like a wolf staring at a little sheep and said with a cold smile, "This young master likes to kill geniuses, especially young geniuses like you. Make your move." Duanmu Lu's face was gloomy, without the slightest fear, and responded cold. "Your bones are very hard." The martial artist in luxurious clothes smiled cold and said, "I just don't know if your bones are harder or this young master's fist is harder." Boom! The moment his voice fell, his figure directly moved, and his whole body's imposing aura soared to the extreme in an instant. He blasted out a punch, and where his fist landed, a fist shadow whizzed out like a mad dragon, blasting towards Duanmu Lu. Chapter 35-26. The Final Sword. The scene in the arena caused Niet Tian's eyes to narrow, and his heart to rise to his throat. The man in the luxurious robes was very young, and was a third-step half-saint. He was definitely a genius in the martial Tao. Although Duanmu Lu was also a genius, he was only a peak paramount god. The gap between the two of them was simply too great. How could a puny ant like you possibly stand up to me? In the dueling ring, The cultivator in splendid clothes was very arrogant. He did not care about Duanmu at all. He roared wildly and arrogantly. As for Duanmu, his expression was grim, and he didn't say a single word. Bang! In the next moment, two terrifying forces collided with each other. A deep rumbling sound came from the void. A figure was sent flying by the impact of the violent force. Duanmu, Tian exclaimed when he saw the figure that had been sent flying backward. It was none other than Duanmu. Duanmu staggered backward a few hundred meters before coming to a steady stop. However, there was a terrifying wound on his body. Blood gushed out and dyed half of his body red. The martial artist in luxurious clothes was too strong. That kind of frightening impact almost made the sword in his hand fall out of his hand. The man in the luxurious robes wasn't smiling at Duanmu, but rather astonishment. What? He had never imagined that Duanmu would survive his attack. Moments ago, he had killed a peak paramount god wolf slave with a single punch. He had assumed that Duanmu wasn't much stronger than that wolf slave, but now it seemed he had underestimated Duanmu. Tian's eyes flickered when he saw that Duanmu had stopped moving, and he calmed down a bit. It seems I've underestimated you, boy. At this time, the well-dressed martial artist smiled cold and said, "But it doesn't matter. You will die all the same." As his voice faded, he attacked once again. The aura around his body had actually increased by a lot compared to before. Waves of frightening killing force surged wildly outside his body like a storm. The tearing force impacted the void, as if it wanted to forcefully tear the space apart. Really, Duanmu's eyes were gloomy and cold. Immediately, the eight extremities Kunwu sword let out a low and vigorous sword hum, and then a terrifying sword intent was released, causing the sword momentum of his entire body to skyrocket. Baji's sword seal. When Tian saw this, his eyes trembled and he was shocked. At this moment, Duanmu had activated the 8 extreme sword seal. It looked like he was going to fight to the death with that cultivator in splendid clothes. Amazing! Su Kuang's eyes also trembled. He was shocked. The fact that Duanmu, at such a young age, had the power of a peak paramount god and could fight a third-step half-sage was a shocking display of latent talent. The moment the Baji sword seal was activated, the terrifying sword momentum stunned the cultivator in splendid clothes. Obviously, he didn't expect that Duanmu would have such a powerful trump card. This kid, what a strong sword intent. The people outside the arena were also shocked, their eyes trembling as they looked at Duanmu. Kill. At this time, the cultivator in splendid clothes attacked again. A violent force swept through the void like a black cage, enveloping Duanmu. Kill. Duanmu let out a low roar as well, and the sword wheel around him exploded to the extreme in an instant. A majestic aura covered the sky and earth, condensing into a terrifying sword shadow in the air as if it wanted to destroy everything. Boom! The two terrible forces collided head-on. The void exploded with a roar, and then the wild force surged in all directions, rolling like a killing machine. Bang! With a muffled sound, Duanmu was once again sent flying, leaving a bloody trail in the air. But once again he stood firm. Although he was covered in blood, his aura was still stable, and his sword intent was incomparably sharp. The cultivator in splendid clothes trembled, and the surprise in his eyes turned into shock. Duanmu's strength was far beyond what he had expected, and yet he was still standing. Duanmu, Tian's eyes trembled, and his face was incomparably gloomy. He could see that Duanmu was about to reach his limit. "Well done, kid," the cultivator in splendid clothes said coldly, his eyes filled with killing intent. "You deserve to be taken seriously. I won't lose to you," Duanmu said in a deep voice, his eyes filled with unswerving determination. Then his body suddenly trembled, and the surging blood in his body suddenly surged and poured into the Baji Kunwu sword. "You're about to die, and you still want to be so stubborn?" The cultivator in splendid clothes sneered, his eyes extremely cold. In his opinion, Duanmu was just a wolf slave, an ant-like existence, and should have been killed by him. Duanmu's desperate resistance only made this slaughter more enjoyable for him. "The last sword," Duanmu said coldly, the corners of his mouth curling into a cold smile, and the killing intent in his eyes intensified. He had always been a quiet swordsman, and rarely revealed his true killing intent. But now, facing this cultivator in splendid clothes, he could no longer control the killing intent in his heart. "Kid, do you still want to kill me?" Sensing Duanmu's killing intent, the cultivator in splendid clothes sneered and said arrogantly, "You're just a superior god martial artist, and you want to kill a half-step saint? You're dreaming." "Who said I'm a superior god martial artist?" Duanmu smiled cold, and his eyes trembled strangely. Boom! In the next moment, a terrifying aura erupted from his body, surging violently into the sky. He broke through. Nietion's eyes trembled when he saw this scene, and he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He didn't expect that Duanmu would break through at this time. Back in Forest Wolf City, Duanmu showed signs of breaking through after a few days of cultivation, so it was not surprising that he broke through at this time. However, Duanmu was very smart. He was clearly using the cultivator in splendid clothes to maximize the power of his martial body, and then break through in one fell swoop. This kid, he broke through. The crowd also noticed Duanmu's abnormality and shouted in shock. It was hard to imagine that a wolf slave could break through under such circumstances. How is this possible? The cultivator in splendid clothes felt that Duanmu's aura had instantly skyrocketed several times, and he couldn't help but tremble and shout in horror. "Die!" At this time, the corner of Duanmu's mouth twitched, and he spat out a cold word. Then his whole body's sword intent erupted violently, and the 8 extremities Kunwu swept out. The majestic sword shadow was like a raging dragon, sweeping everything and blasting toward the cultivator in splendid clothes. "You?" The cultivator in splendid clothes trembled, and he shouted in horror. He wanted to resist, but it was too late. At this moment, he felt the real aura of death. For the first time, he felt the threat of death. Chapter 35:27. Chapter 35:22. Chapter 35:22 8 Direction Order. In the sky above the martial arts arena, a figure suddenly appeared, staring coldly at Duanmu. "Die!" His eyes suddenly trembled, and then with a low roar, he directly attacked Duanmu. Boom! However, Duanmu was not the slightest bit afraid. He completely disregarded it, and the violent sword shadow rushed towards the martial artist. In the next moment, the sword shadow fell, and the air was filled with blood. The martial artist did not even have the time to scream before he died. Even in death, he did not believe that the person he wanted to kill was actually so terrifying. Boom! At the same time, a terrifying palm shadow appeared in the air. Like a curtain that covered the sky, it carried a powerful killing intent, and it rushed towards Duanmu. Duanmu's eyes trembled, and he suddenly felt a terrifying pressure covering the sky and earth, as if it was going to tear his martial body apart. This kind of terrifying power made him despair. It was not something he could contend against. Boom! At the moment of life and death, a sword shadow appeared in the air, and a violent power swept across everything, directly shattering the palm shadow. Following that, a silver-haired figure appeared in the sky above the martial arts arena. It was Nietion. "Teacher!" Duanmu suddenly raised his head, and when he saw Nietion's figure, his eyes burned with excitement as he shouted in surprise. "Duanmu, are you all right?" Nietion looked at Duanmu and asked calmly. "I'm fine." Duanmu nodded and forced a smile. Although he was seriously injured, it was fortunate that he was not in danger. What's going on?" When the crowd saw the scene on the martial arts arena, they were all stunned, and their expressions were filled with shock. In that instant, it was too chaotic, and no one could react for a moment. No one had expected that Duanmu would explode with such a terrifying power in an instant, and directly kill the martial artist. What was even more unexpected was that there were actually two martial warriors that attacked at almost the same time, interfering in the battle in the arena. The person who made the first move clearly wanted to save the martial artist in luxurious clothes, but he failed. The silver-haired cultivator successfully blocked that person's attack and saved Wanmu. What happened next was serious. No matter what the reason was, these two people had violated the rules of the wolf slave farm. Now, it was up to the people of the wolf slave farm to deal with the current situation. "You two, how dare you?" At this moment, a deep and sinister voice rang out. Immediately after, a figure dressed in black appeared. His sinister eyes stared at Nyetian and the other cultivator coldly. Boom! 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 Just as his voice fell, a violent aura appeared in the surrounding void. Dozens of black-clothed cultivators appeared around the arena. Each of them wore black robes that covered their faces. Their auras were powerful. They were the dark guards of the wolf slave farm. When Nyetian heard that person's voice, he couldn't help but frown. His expression changed slightly. He turned around and saw a face that made him stunned. It was actually him. The person he saw at this moment turned out to be the judge who had arranged the battle between Sun Wolf City and Songlang City not long ago. The wolf slave commander who had given him the Wolf Knight order. "It's you, Nyetian." The wolf slave commander's eyes trembled when he saw Nyetian, and he exclaimed in surprise. These two know each other. The crowd couldn't help but exclaim when they saw this scene. It turned out that Nyetian and the wolf slave commander of the wolf slave farm knew each other. In the next moment, the crowd couldn't help but look at the other martial warrior with sympathy. This person was the first to interfere in the battle in the arena. Moreover, Nyetian and the wolf slave knew each other. He was probably out of luck. However, this person was not afraid at all. His pair of gloomy eyes stared at Nyetian, looking like a wild beast that wanted to devour someone. The two of you should know that the rules of the wolf slave farm forbid outsiders from interfering in a battle. At this moment, the wolf slave commander looked at Nyetian with a strange light in his eyes. Then his face sank and he said in a cold tone, "I know." Nyetian nodded slightly. Then he looked at the other person and said, "He was the one who interfered first. So what if he interfered?" That person smiled coldly. His expression was incomparably stern and insolent, as if he didn't care about the wolf slave farm at all. "Your tone is really arrogant." The wolf slave commander's eyes sank as he locked his gaze on that person cold. Dozens of wolf slave farm hidden guards also locked their auras on that person. This person was so arrogant that he was clearly provoking the wolf slave farm. If the wolf slave commander didn't do anything at this moment, the wolf slave farm would lose its face. Oof. That person sneered and immediately took out a token. He looked at the wolf slave commander and said, "Can I interfere now?" The wolf slave commander's eyes couldn't help but tremble when he saw the token. His expression became sluggish, and he said in a trembling voice, Eight directions token. Omniscient order." When the crowd heard this name, their eyes trembled. They looked at the badge in astonishment, as if they had just seen something terrifying. Who would have thought that this person actually had an 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce's 8 Paths token? The 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce was equally as famous as the 1,000 Treasures Chamber of Commerce. They were one of the largest chambers of commerce in the All-Heaven Sacred World. The 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce's influence was spread all over the All-Heavens Sacred World. It had a branch in almost every sacred world. The octagonal token that this person took out should be a branch token. But even so, this token represented too many things. After all, the Wolf Slave Field and Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf were just local snakes in the 7th sacred world of cultivators. On the other hand, the 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce was a truly powerful dragon that they could not afford to offend. So your excellency is from 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce. After a while, Wolf C spoke, but his expression had clearly changed. It was somewhat unsightly, and even his voice was trembling. 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce. Nyetan narrowed his eyes, wondering which was stronger, this Chamber of Commerce or 10,000 Treasures Chamber of Commerce. Since Wolfsea was so afraid of 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce, he should also be afraid of 10,000 Treasures Chamber of Commerce. If he knew that one of the wolf slaves they had captured not long ago belonged to 10,000 Treasures Chamber of Commerce, his expression would certainly not be good. I am from the 7 Cultivators Chamber of Commerce branch of 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce. My name is Shun Han. Shun Han put away the 8 Paths token and said in a cold voice, "The one who died in the arena just now was the youngest son of 7 Cultivators branch president Shen Mubai, Shen Zhanfang." This, Wolfsea could not help frowning when he heard Shun Han's words, his expression changing dramatically as he was filled with shock. It turned out that the person who died in the arena just now had such a noble identity. No wonder Shun Han ignored the rules of the arena and directly saved him. Unfortunately, he was still a step too late. Shen Zhanfang had died under Duanmu Lu's sword. Senior Shen Han, this was an accident. After a while, Wolfsea calmed down and said, "Young Master Shen entered the arena himself and unfortunately died in the hands of a wolf slave. This is not the fault of our wolf slave field." Chapter 35:28. Who dare to touch him? Shun Han's eyes were filled with killing intent, as if he wished he could skin Nye Tian alive. Duanmu Lu killed Shen Zhanfang, so of course he had to die, but since Nye Tian tried to stop him, he had to die as well. That wolf slave killed young Master Shun, so of course he has to die. Lang Si frowned and said with an ugly expression, "But Nye Tian only tried to stop him. There's no need for him to die." To Nye Tian's surprise, Lang Si was actually pleading for him. He must die. Shun Han's face was gloomy as he stared at Nye Tian like a wolf, his words filled with killing intent. Nye Tian stopping him from killing Duanmu Lu made his hatred for Nye Tian even greater than Duanmu Lu's. This, Lang Si looked embarrassed and hesitated. "Old thing, think carefully. No matter how strong your evil moon Tianlang is, it's just a force from the 7th sacred world of cultivators. If you anger our 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce, I guarantee that your evil moon Tianlang will be removed from the 7th sacred world of cultivators." Seeing Lang Si hesitate, Shun Han bluntly said, "What relationship would the latter have with Nye Tian in the future?" Lang Si frowned, and his expression became even uglier. He knew that Shun Han was right. Evil Moon Tianlang was a peak force in the entire 7th sacred world of cultivators, but it was nothing in the all-heaven sacred world. Evil Moon Tianlang was not afraid of 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce's 7 Cultivators branch. But if 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce's elders came forward, it would be a great threat to all of Evil Moon Tianlang. 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce might not make a big fuss over a small branch, but if things really got out of hand, 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce would not sit idly by. For a moment, Lang Si was caught in a dilemma. He wanted to protect Nye Tian, not because he wanted to save Nye Tian, but because of the power in the latter's body. Moreover, he knew that Nye Tian was the Lord of the Sky. The 5 forces behind Heart of the Sky might not be as strong as 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce individually, but when they joined forces, they were no weaker than 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce. There were too many secrets on Nye Tian, causing Wolfsea to hesitate. "Old bastard, I order you to kill this brat and that wolf slave." At this time, Shun Han was already impatient and said coldly. Wolfsea's eyes darkened as he said, "Men, kill that wolf slave and capture Nye Tian." "Yes." A shadow guard stepped forward and answered. Then, his figure moved and directly rushed towards Duanmu Lu. "Who dares touch him?" Right at this moment, Nye Tian took a step forth and roared out as a terrifying sword intent burst forth, slamming into the void with a sharp and forceful force. The shadow guard felt the fluctuation of sword intent in the air and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He then looked at Nye Tian and said in a cold tone, "Brat, scram for me. The one who should scram is you." Nye Tian's eyes suddenly turned cold as he released his aura madly, forcing the shadow guard to retreat again and again. How could this be? The shadow guard steadied himself as his eyes widened in surprise. He was a 7th layer heavenly yin cultivator, while Nye Tian was obviously only at the 2nd layer. Yet he was able to force him back with just his aura. It was incredible. If you take half a step closer, you'll die. Nyetion's eyes darkened as he said coldly, "Smelly brat, you court death." The shadow guard's eyes darkened as he roared angrily, his aura surging madly as he prepared to attack. "Stand down." But at this moment, Wolf C's voice suddenly rang out, and he growled, "Sir Wolf C." The shadow guard was taken aback as he bowed slightly to Wolf C, not knowing what was going on. "You're not his opponent." Wolf C's face was gloomy as he motioned for the shadow guard to stand down. The shadow guard was stunned for a moment as he was puzzled, but he still retreated. He couldn't understand why Wolf C would say that he wasn't Nyetion's opponent when he was a 7th layer Heavenly Yun cultivator. Could this 2nd layer Heavenly Yun cultivator really be stronger than him? Wolf C was right. He knew Nyetion's strength better than anyone else. He had seen Nyetion defeat Ming Tai and Su Kuanga with his own eyes. At that time, Nyetion's strength was only at the 1st layer Heavenly Yun. But now, in just a few days, Nyetion had miraculously broken through to the 2nd layer Heavenly Yun. There was no doubt that the current Nyetion was even stronger than before. "Old thing, what do you mean by this?" Shenhan's face darkened as he looked at Wolf C and questioned. "Sir, please calm down." Wolf C suppressed the anger in his heart as he replied. He then looked at Nyetion and asked, "Nyetion, must you save this wolf slave?" Nyetion nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "Nyetion, do you know how many experts there are in this entire wolf slave farm?" Wolf C's eyes narrowed as he asked Nyetion in a cold voice. "Whoever dares to touch him will have to do it over my dead body." Nyetion's face was gloomy and his eyes didn't fluctuate much. "Brat, do you think you can stop so many shadow guards?" Shenhan sneered and asked in a loud voice. "You could try first." Nyetion's eyes darkened as he looked at Shenhan provocatively. Shenhan's face darkened and he was speechless. He looked at Nyetion with fear in his eyes. His strength was at the 5th layer of Heavenly Yun, much higher than Nyetion, but he felt a strong threat from Nyetion. Moreover, he saw with his own eyes that the 7th layer Heavenly Yun Shadow Guard was forced back by Nyetion's aura. He even suspected that Nyetion could kill him in one move. "Nyetion, you can't stop everyone." Wolf C frowned before turning to Duanmu Lu and saying solemnly, "As long as this wolf slave dies, there is still room to turn things around. With your identity, at least you won't have to die." He believed that Nyetion must have something on him that could prove his identity. It was just that he hadn't taken it out yet. As long as he publicly admitted that he was the Lord of the Sky, even 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce wouldn't dare do anything to him. However, Nyetion didn't seem to have any intention of admitting his identity. The Lord of the Sky was related to the 5 super forces, so even if Wolf C knew something, he didn't dare say it out loud. "If you want to act, just give the order. No more nonsense." Tianling responded coldly, his expression cold and indifferent. "Nyetion, you're forcing this Wolf C's hand." Wolf C's eyes sank as he growled. "Let's do it," Nyetion said with a grim expression. Wolf C's eyes were extremely gloomy, and his expression was gloomy. After hesitating for a long time, he finally spat out 2 words. "Do it." "Yes." The several dozen wolf slave field shadow guards roared at the same time, their momentum as heavy as a mountain. Asterisk boom. Asterisk the next moment. The momentum of the several dozen shadow guards skyrocketed at the same time, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Suddenly, an endless oppressive force crashed down on Nyetion like a raging wave. "Oh no!" Su Kuangji's eyes trembled when he saw this scene and cried out in horror. In the blink of an eye, he moved to help Nyetion. "Stop!" But at that moment, a low voice suddenly sounded out. Then a figure appeared in the air above the martial arena, standing there like a mountain. "HM?" Nyetion frowned as he stared at the figure, his eyes trembling as he called out in surprise, "It's him, second uncle." At the same time, Su Kuangji's eyes trembled as he stared at the newcomer and shouted in his heart. Chapter 35:29. Heaven-Piercing Wolf. Second uncle? Su Kuangge stared at Wolf King Su Cheng and actually called him second uncle. The two of them were actually uncle and nephew. Asterisk Kong. Asterisk the moment Su Cheng's figure landed, his whole body released a surging, imposing aura, forcibly blocking the joint oppression of the dozens of wolf slave field secret guards. The void rumbled, and the two imposing auras collapsed with a loud bang. This! Everyone's eyes trembled as they exclaimed in surprise. All eyes were focused on Su Cheng. Sir Wolf King. Lang Si reacted at this time, and after seeing Su Cheng, his eyes could not help trembling as he called out in shock. His figure flickered, and he arrived beside Su Cheng, bowing slightly in a cautious manner. As the Wolf King, Su Cheng's aura was extremely powerful, and just by standing there, he gave off a great sense of oppression. "What's going on here?" Su Cheng asked Lang Si cold. "Reporting to Sir, this person is called Nie Tian. He violated the rules of the wolf slave field and openly intervened in a battle in the martial arena." Lang Si was very cautious as he glanced over at Nie Tian and said simply, "Is that all?" Su Cheng frowned and immediately turned his eyes to Shen Han, asking, "Who is this person?" "My name is Shen Han, a member of 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce." Without waiting for Lang Si to answer, Shen Han spoke directly with a very arrogant look on his face, not even putting Su Cheng in his eyes. Although his strength was far inferior to Su Cheng's, he was a member of 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce, so, with this identity, he felt his status was above Su Cheng's. Su Cheng frowned, and his expression instantly became gloomy. "Sir," at this time, Lang Si lowered his voice and explained what had just happened to Su Cheng. "So, you acted first." Su Cheng looked at Shen Han cold and said after listening. "So what?" Shen Han showed no fear and said arrogantly, "I was trying to save my young master. My young master died in the wolf slave field. Shouldn't your wolf slave field give my 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce an explanation?" "Explanation?" Su Cheng sneered and said, "He took the initiative to enter the martial arena. Whether he lived or died was his own choice. You openly intervening in a battle is a provocation to the wolf slave field." Shen Han frowned and his face darkened. He didn't expect Su Cheng to be so domineering. He asked what he mean by that. "You don't need to use 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce to pressure me. You are just a member of a branch of 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce. If things really get out of hand, 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce may not intervene." Su Cheng replied calmly, "Don't you chambers of commerce like to make peace and keep the peace?" "You." Shen Han's face darkened. He was speechless. At this moment, the crowd was also stunned. They looked at Su Cheng in shock. Su Cheng appeared calm on the surface, but in fact he was very tough and did not even put 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce in his eyes. "What are you going to do?" After a while, Shen Han said cold, "Could it be that our young master has died, just like that?" Nie Tian is not a member of the wolf slave field. He violated the rules of the wolf slave field and will be dealt with by our wolf slave field. It's not your place to intervene. Su Cheng's face was gloomy as his eyes swept over Nie Tian before landing on Duanmu Lu and saying, "As for this wolf slave, he didn't do anything wrong. Since he was able to kill the Chun family's young master, it proves that he is a valuable wolf slave." "HM?" Shen Han heard Su Cheng's words and frowned, asking coldly, "Do you want to just let this go?" "Our 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce." "Don't mention 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce to me again." Before Shen Han could finish, Su Cheng's face suddenly sank, and he interrupted him directly. "You can't speak on behalf of 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce." Shen Han's eyes trembled as he felt Su Cheng's anger. Obviously frightened, he subconsciously took a few steps back. "Nie Tian, you want to save this wolf slave, don't you?" At this time, Su Cheng no longer paid attention to Shen Han and asked Nie Tian. Nie Tian nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "All right, I'll give you a chance." Su Cheng looked at Nie Tian and seemed to hesitate for a moment before saying, "Challenge the Heavenly Wolf. If you win, not only can you avoid the punishment of the wolf slave arena, you can also take this wolf slave away." Heavenly Wolf. When everyone heard these words, their eyes couldn't help trembling as they exclaimed in unison. Unexpectedly, the opportunity Su Cheng gave Nie Tian was actually to challenge the Heavenly Wolf. Challenging the Heavenly Wolf had not happened in the wolf-slave arena for a long time. Heavenly Wolf? Yet Tian frowned and couldn't help asking, what does that mean? Heavenly Wolf means that you accept a challenge from anyone in the wolf-slave arena. If you can win 100 matches in a row or remain undefeated for 5 days, you win. Su Cheng's eyes flashed strangely as he said coldly, accept a challenge from anyone? Nye Tian frowned and said, don't tell me that an expert like the Wolf King can also challenge me. Of course not. Su Cheng's mouth twitched and said, your strength is at the 2nd level of Heavenly Rhythm Holy Disciple, so your Heavenly Wolf challenge will be in the Holy Disciple arena. Only Holy Disciples or warriors below the Holy Disciple level can challenge you. All right. Nye Tian frowned and immediately understood. He smiled faintly and happily agreed. His current strength was almost invincible in the Heavenly Rhythm realm. Even Su Kuanga, who was at the peak of the 9th level of Heavenly Rhythm realm, lost to him. It seemed that challenging the Heavenly Wolf was not difficult for him. Nye Tian, challenging the Heavenly Wolf is not as easy as you think. You will soon find out what kind of opponent you will face. Su Cheng smiled and said with a gloomy look, I am not afraid of anyone below the Heavenly Mandate, Saint Master. Nye Tian's mouth twitched as he said indifferently. His voice was calm, but it was filled with a domineering and sharp aura. Boy, you talk big. Shen Han sneered at this moment, his face gloomy and murderous. He absolutely did not believe that Nye Tian could successfully challenge the Heavenly Wolf, because challenging the Heavenly Wolf was definitely not as easy as Su Cheng made it out to be. The opponent Nye Tian would face would be beyond his imagination. This is how I will deal with it. At this time, Su Cheng looked at Shen Han and said, if Nye Tian loses, he will die. I'll leave the wolf slave to you. If Nye Tian wins, don't complain. All right. Shen Han sneered and said, Sir Wolf King, it seems that you are still very afraid of 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce. In his opinion, Su Cheng letting Nye Tian challenge the Heavenly Wolf was equivalent to letting Nye Tian die. Victory or defeat is uncertain. Don't be happy too early. Su Cheng glanced at Shen Han and smiled faintly, a strange light flashing across his eyes. Then he looked at Nye Tian and said, Nye Tian, get ready. We will begin immediately. Chapter 35:30. Heavenly Wolf Bet. Nye Tian brought Duanmu Lu to Su Kuanga's side. The latter's face was gloomy, as if he was worried about Nye Tian. Brother Su, please help me take care of Duanmu Lu. Nye Tian said calmly with an indifferent expression. Su Kuanga nodded, as if he wanted to say something, but didn't. Nye Tian nodded slightly, and warned Duanmu Lu that no matter what happened, he must stay by Su Kuanga's side. In fact, he was very curious about the relationship between Su Kuanga and Su Cheng, and why Su Cheng would come here to help him. However, Su Kuanga didn't say, and he didn't ask. Nye Tian, be careful. Su Kuanga said solemnly, nodding slightly. He was very worried for Nye Tian, even though the latter was very strong and had even defeated him. However, Nye Tian didn't know what kind of opponent he would face in the Heavenly Wolf Challenge. Very few martial artists in the wolf-slave field succeeded in challenging the Heavenly Wolf. In the last tens of thousands of years, no one had succeeded. In particular, Nye Tian's strength was very awkward, 2nd layer of Heavenly Rhythm. If he was a Stage 9 Pseudo Saint or a Stage 9 Heavenly Rhythm, the situation would be much better. He was at the 2nd layer of Heavenly Rhythm, but he had to face countless Stage 9 Heavenly Rhythm martial artists. Would Nye Tian be able to win 100 matches in a row, or last for 5 days in the arena? Nye Tian, go on stage. At this time, Su Cheng's voice sounded, and he said solemnly, In. Nye Tian nodded slightly, smiled faintly at Su Kuanga and Duanmu Lu, and then his figure moved, stepping into the arena. He knew that once he stepped foot into the martial arena, he would have to face countless bitter battles. Teacher, Duanmu Lu looked at Nye Tian's figure, his eyes trembled, and he secretly clenched his fists. He hated himself for being too weak and not being able to help Nye Tian. Don't worry, he will be fine. Su Kwanga comforted Duanmu Lu, but his expression was not that calm. I hereby announce that Nye Tian's challenge to the Heavenly Wolf begins. At this moment, Su Cheng's gaze swept across the crowd, and he announced in a loud voice. At this moment, almost all the people in the wolf-slave field had their eyes focused on Nye Tian. Everyone wanted to see how far this Heavenly Wolf challenger could go. I bet 100 top-grade St. Crystals, Heavenly Wolf bet. Then, Shunhan's voice rang out. He said loudly, "Which friend wants to get rich? Hurry up and enter the arena." Heavenly Wolf bet? Nye Tian looked at Shunhan and couldn't help but frown. He was stunned for a moment, not knowing what that meant. When the crowd heard Shunhan's words, they immediately became excited. Killing a cultivator at the second stage of Heaven Rhythm for 100 supreme grade St. Crystals. That's a great deal. Is this kid's life that valuable? It's actually worth 100 top-grade St. Crystals. He offended someone from 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce, so someone is willing to pay for his life. Everyone discussed as they looked at Nye Tian with great excitement, as if they were staring at a piece of fat meat. The so-called Heavenly Wolf bet was, in fact, someone buying the life of the person who challenged the Heavenly Wolf. Shunhan had offered 100 top-grade St. Crystals for the Heavenly Wolf bet, so whoever killed Nye Tian would receive this 100 Heavenly Wolf bet. Of course, if Nye Tian successfully challenged the Heavenly Wolf challenger, the Heavenly Wolf bet would be his. The life of a cultivator at the second stage of Heaven Rhythm was actually worth 100 top-grade St. Crystals. This already made everyone unable to hold back. Let me try. In the next moment, a deep roar rang out, and a burly figure appeared in the arena. He stared at Nye Tian with a pair of wolf-like eyes that were filled with killing intent. Nye Tian looked at this person and narrowed his eyes slightly before smiling faintly. You can't get 100 top-grade St. Crystals. Arrogant. The man let out a low roar as his aura surged crazily. A terrifying power that could topple mountains and overturn the seas slammed into the void. Die. The next moment, the man let out a low roar and attacked directly. A violent fist shadow flew out and bombarded towards Nye Tian. Nye Tian stood in place like a mountain, not moving an inch. Only when the fist shadow was less than 10 meters away from him did he move. Taking a step forward, a sword intent shot out and shattered the fist shadow. Pooh! Then, the sound of flesh tearing rang out as a bloody hole appeared on the man's chest. Blood gushed out and dyed his body red. How? How is this possible? The man took a few steps back before stabilizing himself and looking at Nye Tian in horror, completely unable to believe the scene in front of him. He didn't even see where the sword intent came from before his body was pierced through. This kid is terrifying. The crowd was also stunned when they saw this scene. Not many people saw when Nye Tian made his move. Nye Tian's sword intent was extremely sharp and powerful, exceeding everyone's expectations. I won't kill you. Piss off, Nye Tian said coldly while looking at the man. His first opponent was a second-layer Heaven Rhythm cultivator like him, but the latter was like a fish on a chopping block in front of him. Nye Tian didn't want to kill too much, so he spared his opponent's life. He just wanted everyone to know that Nye Tian, was not a weakling. Thank you. The man's eyes flickered. After he reacted, he thanked Lin Fan with a trembling voice and left. No matter how stupid he was, he knew that Nye Tian had gone easy on him. Otherwise, he would have been dead by now. The crowd was silent for a while before someone started to speak. This kid is a little strange. It looks like the battle of the Heavenly Wolf is going to be interesting. His strength is indeed much stronger than cultivators of the same level, but that won't change anything. At most, he'll live a little longer. Yeah, he's only in the second layer Heaven Rhythm. If he meets a 9th layer Heaven Rhythm cultivator, he'll be killed in one move. The crowd started to re-evaluate Nye Tian's strength, but everyone was sure that Nye Tian wouldn't be able to hold on for long. I'll bid another 100 top-grade St. Crystals. Shunhan shouted at this moment. Nye Tian easily defeated his first challenger, proving his strength. This made the other challengers a little afraid. Many of them wanted to watch a little longer, waiting for the Heavenly Wolf bet to add up. Shunhan added another 100 top-grade St. Crystals, doubling the Heavenly Wolf bet. I'll bid 10 top-grade St. Crystals. I'll bid 7 top-grade St. Crystals. I'll bid 20 top-grade St. Crystals. Following that, more voices rang out, adding the Heavenly Wolf bet. Most of these people were busybodies. They wanted the battle of the Heavenly Wolf bet to continue, increasing the bet and attracting even stronger cultivators to challenge them. Perhaps the Heavenly Wolf bet wasn't too high right now, but as it went down, it would only get higher and higher. In the end, it might reach an unimaginable level. After all, everyone could raise their bet. In any case, it was just some money. As long as they could watch an exciting match, they didn't care. I'll go. At this moment, someone finally couldn't hold back anymore. He roared and stepped onto the stage. Chapter 35-31. Fatal Temptation. Someone's going up. Seeing a cultivator appear on the stage, everyone's eyes trembled and they shouted in surprise. How can this kind of person be Nie Tian's opponent? Su Kuanga frowned and shook his head with a smile. The people who stood up to challenge obviously didn't know Nie Tian's true strength. They were just giving themselves up. Kid, your head is too valuable. You can't blame me for this. On the martial arena, the martial artist laughed coldly as he stared at Nie Tian with incomparably murderous eyes and spoke in a ghastly tone. I only gave you a warning in the first round. I won't be lenient in the second round. Nie Tian looked at the cultivator and said with a faint smile, Unfortunately, you'll be the first sacrifice on my path to defeat the Heavenly Wolf. He didn't kill the first person as a warning, but he wouldn't be lenient with the second person. He had to let everyone see how strong and ruthless he was with his strength and methods. Really? The man looked at Nie Tian and clearly felt a strong sense of danger, but he still managed to maintain his composure. He sneered and released his aura, attacking brazenly. Bang! However, at the same time, Nie Tian also made his move. A sword intent whistled through the air, extremely sharp. Before anyone could react, a dull sound rang out, and that cultivator turned into a pool of blood. Not even his bones remained. This, everyone's eyes widened as they stared at Nie Tian in astonishment. A cultivator in the third layer of heavenly charm died, just like that. It was shocking. It should be known that even in the holy world, Sage Realm cultivators were not that common. Most importantly, Nie Tian's method of killing was too easy. He only used sword intent. No sword moves, just sword intent. Without a doubt, Nie Tian's true strength was far beyond what everyone had seen. The scene fell silent once again. Everyone's eyes were filled with confusion and apprehension as they looked at Nie Tian. Next, Nie Tian stood in midair above the arena, as the corners of his mouth twitched as he spoke indifferently. But after his voice fell, the entire arena was silent for a long time. No one responded. It was obvious that those powerful martial artists did not want to make a move yet. I bid 100 top-grade St. Crystals, plus the Heavenly Wolf bet. I bid a second-order St. Core and Heavenly Wolf bet. I offer a first-stage St. Pill, plus the Heavenly Wolf bet. Following that, another round of bets could be heard. The crowd seemed to have gone crazy, raising their bets one after another, hoping that someone would challenge Nie Tian. A moment later, the serious stakes had increased to an unimaginable level. Let me announce that the Heavenly Wolf bet has now been increased to 3,000 top-quality St. Crystals, 7 St. Cores, 6 St. Pills, and a Sacred Array Scroll. At this moment, one of the people from the Wolf Slave Farm announced the Heavenly Wolf bet. When the crowd heard this person's words, their eyes couldn't help but tremble in shock. This time, the Heavenly Wolf bet had reached such an astonishing level after only 2 rounds. It was too terrifying. Nie Tian frowned. He was also very shocked. 3,000 top-quality St. Crystals, St. Cores, St. Pills, and Sacred Array Scroll were too tempting. One had to know that when Nie Tian bought the third-stage Soul Concentration Scroll, he only spent 400 top-quality St. Crystals. And the Heavenly Wolf bet was just the beginning. Next, the Heavenly Wolf bet would accumulate to an unimaginable level. With so many Heavenly Wolf bets, Many martial artists would take the risk out of desperation. Let me do it. As expected, there was finally a martial artist who couldn't resist the temptation and stood up. Tian faced the challenger with an indifferent expression. This challenger was also not strong, only at the fourth stage heavenly rhythm. As expected, Tian won the third round with a single move. At this moment, he didn't show the slightest bit of mercy. His first move was to kill his opponent. Since these people were trying to kill him, why should he show mercy? After half a day, Tian won 19 rounds in a row, and the strongest opponent he had defeated was at the seventh stage heavenly rhythm. More importantly, he hadn't even drawn his sword so far. Everyone could tell that Tian was a swordsman. Therefore, even before he drew his sword, his true battle prowess was already immeasurable. At this moment, the way everyone looked at Tian gradually changed. They couldn't hide the shock and fear in their hearts. At this moment, they had no choice but to reevaluate Tian's strength. This kid is too terrifying. He can easily kill a seventh-stage heavenly rhythm martial artist with the strength of a second-stage heavenly rhythm martial artist. He's too strong. He still hasn't drawn his sword. I wonder who will be the first to make him draw his sword. Those who challenged him before weren't very strong. I wonder how far this kid can go. As the crowd discussed, their eyes became blazing. This time, the Heavenly Wolf Challenge had successfully aroused everyone's curiosity. At this moment, someone from the Wolf Slave Field announced the Heavenly Wolf Challenge again. I hereby announce that the Heavenly Wolf bet has increased to 40,000 top-grade Saint Crystals, 57 Saint Cores, 63 Saint Pills, 7 Sacred Array Scrolls, and a Fate Art. When everyone heard this, their eyes became dull. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. Tian had only won 19 rounds, but the Heavenly Wolf bet had increased to such an exaggerated level. Who knew what the Heavenly Wolf bet would be if Tian won a few dozen more rounds? Are these people crazy? Su Quanwang frowned, and his expression was very ugly. He knew that the higher the Heavenly Wolf bet, the more dangerous the situation Tian was in. Such a high Heavenly Wolf bet would not only attract the cultivators present, but it would also attract other cultivators from the seventh sacred cultivator world and even attract top assassins. However, the higher the Heavenly Wolf bet was, the more benefits it would bring to Tian. If he won, the Heavenly Wolf bet would be his. This was an unimaginable amount of wealth. Most of the people present who could enter the Wolf Slave Field were cultivators from big forces and families. With so many people paying together, the Heavenly Wolf bet was very high. At this moment, Tian had an indifferent expression. He knew that the cultivators in front of him were nothing. The ones who could really threaten him were at the back. Following that, cultivators continued to challenge him because the temptation of the Heavenly Wolf bet was too great. One day later, Tian won 60 rounds in a row, and the strongest opponent he met was a cultivator at the 9th level of Heavenly Charm. However, he still didn't draw his sword. Even when facing that 9th level Heavenly Charm cultivator, he used his sword intent and the power of his martial body to directly kill him. At this moment, the entire audience was silent. Everyone looked at Tian as if they were looking at a monster. Tian was really too terrifying. At this moment, no one dared to guess where Tian's limit was. Tian didn't draw his sword, which meant that he hadn't used his true strength. At this time, the Heavenly Wolf bet had piled up to a number: 300,000 top-grade Saint Crystals, thousands of Saint Cores, thousands of Saint Elixir Pills, dozens of Sacred Array Scrolls, and even enchantment scrolls, all kinds of life force, and other things. When a cultivator's strength reached a certain level, these material things were relatively less important. However, when these materials reached a certain level and were very useful to the cultivator, it became a very fatal temptation. At this time, even the Heavenly Mandate Realm powerhouses were tempted. Unfortunately, they were not qualified to go on stage. Chapter 35-32. Cold Iron Body. When Tian saw the martial artist that appeared on the stage, he could not help but frown and exclaim in surprise. At this moment, the martial artist that appeared in front of him was a giant with a height of nearly 3 meters. The latter stood there, giving people a feeling of an extremely strong, explosive power, like an iron tower. Moreover, his entire body surged with an extremely terrifying aura, vigorous and mighty, as heavy and imposing as a mountain. Tai Clan's people. When everyone saw that person, their faces suddenly changed, and they immediately cried out in alarm. No one had expected that even the Tai Clan's people would appear. In the Wolf's Night Mountain, there were 7 great family forces. Their status was very high, and there were many experts in the family. Su Kuanga's Su clan and Ming Tai's Ming clan were one of them. At this moment, the giant martial artist was from the Tai clan, which was also one of the 7 great families. These 7 great families each had a powerful bloodline power, such as the Ming clan's Raging Flame Crystal and the Su clan's Golden Dragon Punisher. As for the Tai clan's bloodline power, it was the Cold Iron Body. Rumor has it that the Tai clan martial artists with the bloodline power could transform their martial body into cold iron, instantly increasing the strength of their martial body by several times or even dozens of times. The Tai clan martial artists who activated the cold iron body were equivalent to strengthening their martial body by several times. It was very terrifying. It's actually Tai Zhong. When Su Kuanga saw the Tai clan martial artist, his eyes could not help but sink, and his expression changed slightly. Tai Zhong was very famous in the Tai clan. He was a genius of the Tai clan's younger generation. Sir Su, is this person very powerful? Will he be a threat to teacher? Duan Lu saw Su Kuanga's reaction and could not help but frown and asked nervously. No, he is not Nie Tian's opponent. Su Kuanga nodded slightly and said lightly. Although Tai Zhong was powerful, compared to a genius like Nine Wolf, he was still lacking. Nie Tian could even defeat Su Kuanga, so Tai Zhong naturally could not threaten him. However, in Su Kuanga's view, if Nie Tian wanted to defeat Tai Zhong, he must use his true strength. Even though Nie Tian had already won 60 battles in a row, he was still far from being able to defeat the Heavenly Wolf. The further they went, the more intense the battle became. Nie Tian's premature exposure was not a good thing for him. People from the Tai clan, I hope you can make Nie Tian use his true strength. At this moment, Su Chung looked at the stage from afar and thought to himself. After Nie Tian stepped onto the martial stage, the strength he displayed shocked him. When Wenren Xiang looked for him, she told him that Nie Tian had defeated Su Kuanga. At the time, Su Chung didn't believe it. But now, he felt that Wenren Xiang wasn't lying. Even he couldn't tell exactly how powerful Nie Tian's battle prowess was. He knew that Tai Zhong was not a match for Nie Tian. At most, he could force Nie Tian to use his true strength. I am Tai Zhong. Thank you for your guidance. At this moment, Tai Zhong spoke coldly on the martial stage. His entire body's aura was crazily released. Instantly, the entire martial stage shook as if it was going to collapse. Nie Tian. Nie Tian responded with a faint smile. Finally, a decent opponent came. But facing Tai Zhong, he was not afraid in the slightest. He even felt that although Tai Zhong looked stupid, his strength was enough, but his speed was very slow. I'm going to attack. In the next moment, Tai Zhong let out a low roar and punched out. Instantly, a black fish shadow appeared in the air, pressing down on Nie Tian like a mountain. The surrounding space immediately stagnated, as if it had been sealed by a terrifying force. Nie Tian felt a strange fluctuation of aura. He couldn't help but frown, and his expression slightly changed. He felt that when Tai Zhong's fist landed, it released a spirit formation power that sealed the surrounding space, making it impossible for him to dodge. It seemed that his previous worry was unnecessary. Tai Zhong's space-sealing power perfectly made up for his lack of speed. Good timing. Then, Nie Tian smiled faintly. The corner of his mouth pulled into a faint curve. His aura surged crazily as he threw a punch at Tai Zhong. Bang! In the next moment, the two fists collided and a muffled explosion erupted in the sky, while the entire arena shook along with it. Then, Nie Tian and Tai Zhong's figures retreated at the same time. However, Nie Tian only retreated a few meters while Tai Zhong retreated dozens of meters. How is this possible? The scene on the martial stage made everyone's eyes tremble as they exclaimed. It was unbelievable that Nie Tian dared to directly compete with Tai Zhong's strength. The result was that Nie Tian's martial body was even stronger. The most terrifying thing about the Tai family's frost iron body was that it could increase the strength of the martial body. Although Tai Zhong didn't activate the frost iron body, his martial body was far stronger than warriors of the same level. Tai Zhong was a warrior at the 8th level of heaven essence, but his martial body was comparable to a heavenly mandate realm warrior. Nie Tian was only at the 2nd level of heaven essence, but he was able to defeat Tai Zhong with one punch. Could it be that his martial body was stronger than a heavenly mandate realm warrior? This was unbelievable. Nie Tian's martial body was even stronger than a fierce beast. How can your martial body be so strong? Tai Zhong stabilized his body and looked at Nie Tian in shock. The shock in his heart was written on his face. You're not weak either. Nie Tian responded with a faint smile. Tai Zhong didn't know that the most terrifying thing about Nie Tian was his martial body. Nie Tian's martial body had been strengthened countless times. The power of 900 billion stars, the 9 supreme dragon veins, the supreme demonic fire, the power of heaven's punishment, the shackles of the heavenly Tao, and the power of gods and demons were perfectly integrated into his martial body, creating his powerful martial body. At this time, even without any defense, Nie Tian's martial body was comparable to a low-level heavenly mandate realm warrior. Although Tai Zhong's martial body was strong, it was still weaker than Nie Tian's. I don't believe that you're really that strong. Tai Zhong growled cold and punched again. Boom! Nie Tian still didn't dodge and punched out. There was a muffled sound in the air, and Tai Zhong was sent flying. After he stabilized his body, blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. This! Everyone's eyes darkened, and they gasped. Nie Tian's punch actually injured Tai Zhong. Damn it! Tai Zhong was completely infuriated. He roared, and a terrible power surged out of his body. Then, a strange change appeared on his body. His skin turned black and exuded an extreme chill. It was as if his whole body had turned into frost iron. Frost iron body! Seeing this scene, everyone's expression changed, and they exclaimed. This was the frost iron body of the Tai family. Tai Zhong was completely enraged and directly activated the frost iron body. The aura of his body skyrocketed several times. The eyes of the crowd were burning. They wanted to see if Tai Zhong, who had activated the frost iron body, was a match for Nie Tian. Kid, you're dead. Tai Zhong growled, and like a wild beast, he took a step forward and rushed toward Nie Tian. One sword. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. Starlight Heaven Slash appeared in his hand. Then he said lightly. The long sword slashed through the air, and a sword shadow whistled out, attacking Tai Zhong. Huh? Tai Zhong's eyes trembled as he exclaimed in shock. He actually felt an intense threat. Boom! In the next moment, he didn't have time to react. The sword's shadow fell directly. There was a muffled sound in the air, and his figure flew backward. While he was still in the air, his frost iron body was directly broken. When he landed, his body was covered in blood. He was so seriously injured that he couldn't even stand. Nie Tian finally used his sword. Chapter 35-33. 7 cultivators of true virtue were shaken. Chapter 35-28. Killing intent hiss. The entire audience gasped. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the arena. There was dead silence, and no sound could be heard for a long time. The crowd could not believe their eyes. What they had just seen. Tai Zhong, who had activated his frost iron body, was actually defeated by Nie Tian's sword. This was the first time that Nie Tian had used his sword, and it had brought such a big shock to everyone. It seemed that the Tai family's frost iron body was completely vulnerable in front of Nie Tian. Just how strong was Nie Tian's sword intent? The crowd's eyes trembled, and they couldn't react for a long time. How could this be? After a long time, Tai Zhong's eyes trembled, and he cried out in shock. He looked at Nie Tian with fear in his eyes, and he even subconsciously retreated. His whole body was dripping with blood, and beads of sweat oozed from his forehead. He originally thought that after activating his frost iron body, he would definitely be able to defeat Nye with one punch. But the fact was that Nye had seriously injured him with one sword. Moreover, he knew that Nye hadn't used his full strength. Otherwise, he wouldn't be standing. Nye looked at Taizhong and said with a faint smile, "Frost iron body is not bad. Unfortunately, my sword is sharper." If he wanted to, he could have directly killed Taizhong with that sword. However, his heart softened, and seeing that it wasn't easy for Taizhong to cultivate, he spared his life. Nye indifferent voice was filled with undisguised arrogance. Standing in the arena, Nye was like a sharp sword that shone with dazzling light. Taizhong looked at Nye and finally regained some of his calmness. He bowed slightly and said, "Thank you for showing mercy." The corner of Nye mouth curled up, and he just nodded without saying anything. Taizhong's figure moved, and he left the arena. Immediately, the entire wolf slave arena was in an uproar. Although Nye had won 60 battles in a row, none of his opponents were truly amazing. Although there were 9th-level Heavenly Charm martial artists, their combat strength was mediocre. Taizhong, on the other hand, was different. With the title of Tai Clan's Genius, Taizhong's battle prowess was terrifying. However, in front of Nye he was powerless. The crowd looked at Nye and couldn't help but start discussing. Who is this kid? How can he be so terrifying? Yeah, Taizhong is a genius cultivator of the Tai clan. Even if he's not as monstrous as Jiulang, he is definitely not much weaker. Yet, he was actually defeated by this brat with a single sword strike. This is unbelievable. Could it be that this kid's battle prowess is already comparable to the 9 wolf warriors? He's only at the 2nd stage of Heavenly Rhythm. If he was at the 9th stage of Heavenly Rhythm, wouldn't he be able to defeat the Heavenly Wolf? As the crowd spoke, they looked at Nye with even more fear. Nye looked at the crowd with a calm expression, neither arrogant nor rash. At this time, he had won 61 battles in a row and had been standing on the stage for nearly 2 days. However, he knew that the next battle would be the real challenge. The people who appear before him, including Taizhong, were no threat to him. The challengers behind him would only get stronger and stronger. I'll bet 1,000 top-quality St. Crystals on the Heavenly Wolf. At this time, someone raised the Heavenly Wolf bet again. Following that, more and more people raised the Heavenly Wolf bet. Although the money and items would be gone after the bet, it was worth it to attract stronger opponents and let them see more exciting battles. I'll bet 700 top-quality St. Crystals. I'll bet a rank 2 Sacred Array Scroll. I'll bet a rank 3 Sacred Artifact. Everyone raised the Heavenly Wolf bet one after another. The entire wolf slave field seemed to have gone crazy as they kept raising the stakes. At this moment, everything that happened here was quietly transmitted to the outside world. At this time, in one of the 2 main cities of the 7th Sacred Cultivator world, the largest restaurant in Moon City, people were discussing intensely, and what they were talking about was exactly what had happened in the wolf slave market. Did you guys hear? Someone is challenging the Heavenly Wolf in the wolf slave field. The news is already spread. That Heavenly Wolf brat seems to be at the 2nd stage of Heavenly Charm and has already won more than 60 battles in a row. How can a 2nd stage Heavenly Charm win more than 60 battles? Are all his opponents at the 1st stage of Heavenly Charm? His opponents are very strong. There are many high-rank Heavenly Charm cultivators. However, that brat's strength is very strange. Even rank 8 and rank 9 Heavenly Charm cultivators were easily defeated by him. So powerful? That brat's talent is a bit abnormal. Who said it wasn't? I heard that the Heavenly Wolf bet has already reached millions of top-quality Saint Crystals. There are also countless sacred cores, sacred pills, sacred artifacts, sacred arrays, etc. If that brat wins, I'm afraid his wealth is comparable to a small chamber of commerce. What's that brat's name? He can't be a peerless genius from a high-rank sacred world, right? I think he's called Nye. His origin is unknown. Nye. Everyone said and remembered this name. In just half a day, Nietion's name spread throughout the seventh sacred world of cultivators, along with the matter of the heavenly wolf. As a result, the seventh sacred world of cultivators was completely shaken. Many big forces, sects, gangs, clans, and even some dark forces heard the news and came to the wolf slave field. At this time, the wolf slave field was already filled with people. There were at least hundreds of thousands of people. I'm afraid the entire seventh sacred world of cultivators has been alarmed by a single heavenly wolf. Nietion looked at the crowd and couldn't help but frown as he bitterly smiled in his heart. He didn't think that things would develop to this point. At this time, his opponent was not just Wolf Knight Mountain, but the entire seventh sacred world of cultivators. At the same time, Evil Moon Wolf's people were also alarmed. Two Wolf King powerhouses appear to hold the line, with Su Cheng to prevent any trouble. At this time, Nietion had already won 70 battles in a row and was waiting for his next opponent to appear. Everyone, the Heavenly Wolf will pause for a moment. I have something to say to everyone. But at this time, Su Cheng's figure appeared in the sky above the arena. He stood there like a mountain as his eyes swept across the audience, and he loudly said, "I'm sure everyone is clear about the rules of the Sky Wolf Challenge. Everyone who enters the arena is doing so voluntarily. If anything goes wrong, the wolf slave field will have nothing to do with it. Of course, Lord Wolf King, please continue to challenge the Heavenly Wolf." The crowd responded loudly, clearly impatient. Su Cheng smiled slightly and waved his hand, indicating for the Heavenly Wolf to continue. At this time, most of the people who came to the wolf slave field were people from big forces. If these people entered the arena and were killed by Nietion, they would have to bear the consequences themselves. It would have nothing to do with the wolf slave field. Su Cheng's words were not only to clear the responsibility of the wolf slave field in advance, but also to remind everyone to be cautious when challenging others. "Nietion, how much longer can you last?" Su Cheng looked at Nietion and frowned. Then, his figure moved and returned to the distance. The development of the Heavenly Wolf had exceeded his expectations. The seventh sacred world of cultivators was shaken, which was extremely disadvantageous to Nietion. Su Cheng didn't think that Nietion could last until the end. Just as Su Cheng opened the martial stage, a ghost-like figure appeared on the martial stage without anyone noticing. Chapter 35-34. The head of the soul-severing sect in the martial stage. After that person appeared, the surrounding space was immediately filled with a terrifying killing intent. The terrifying aura caused people to suffocate. What a terrifying aura! The crowd outside the stage also sensed the intense, murderous aura. Their eyes couldn't help but tremble as they cried out, "An assassin!" Su Cheng's expression darkened as he looked at that cultivator from afar. That person wasn't very strong, only in the 8th level of Heaven Rhythm. However, he was able to release such a terrifying, murderous aura, which meant that he was a professional assassin. "You're an assassin." Nietion's eyes narrowed as he looked at that person. "Brat, you're very smart." That person sneered. His eyes surged with intense, murderous intent. "But unfortunately, smart people don't live long." "Is that so?" Nietion replied with a smile. "You think you can kill me with a barrier?" That person's eyes trembled when he heard Nietion's words. He was clearly very surprised. He didn't expect Nietion to be able to tell that it was a barrier. "You're not weak, and your murderous aura is also very strong. However, it's impossible for you to release such a powerful, murderous aura." Nietion smiled faintly and said, "However, it's not bad that you were able to fuse your killing intent into your ward and create such a deterrent ward." That person's expression suddenly tensed up as he looked at Nietion. Nietion had actually seen through his technique in an instant. The barrier he created was indeed formed from the fusion of murderous aura. It was a great deterrent to cultivators. Ordinary martial artists, when faced with such a strong killing intent, would naturally be afraid before the battle even began. But Nietion wasn't affected in the slightest. "Brat, it seems that I've underestimated you." In the next moment, that person calmed down and faintly smiled. "But that doesn't change anything. You will still die. Make your move." The corner of Nietion's mouth curled up into a smile. The starlight heavenly slash in his hand trembled, and his sword cry rang out, sweeping away the barrier's power. Kill! At this time, that person let out a low roar and struck out with his palm. Instantly, a violent energy condensed in the air, forming a killing storm. Like a wild beast, it smashed towards Nietion. Boom! The strangulation storm combined with the power of the spirit formation erupted with a frightening sealing power, causing Nietion to feel as if he had entered a cage. Nietion's eyebrows furrowed slightly as he was inwardly surprised. The fact that this person was able to perfectly fuse his attacks with the power of the spirit formation was truly frightening. Stimulated by his attack, his spirit powers sealed off the surrounding space, making it impossible for those who were attacked to dodge. They could only take the attack head-on. Moreover, this kind of attack would cause great pressure to the martial artists, and the deterrence was very strong. Stinking brat, you're no match for me. Obediently accept your death. In the sky, that person laughed sinisterly. His eyes flashed with a cold light, like a venomous wolf in the night, incomparably austere. Boom! Nietion didn't say anything. His body shook, and instantly, an enormous sword aura soared into the sky. The space suddenly trembled, and it actually forcibly broke through the sealed space. Sacred heaven-defying sword. Human sword slashes stars. In the next moment, the corner of Nietion's mouth curled up into a cold smile. Immediately, on the starry heaven slash, the sword light shone brightly, extremely dazzling, and a sharp aura filled the entire martial arts arena. So powerful! At this moment, the crowd felt the sword intent ripple in the air. Their eyes couldn't help but violently tremble, and they cried out in shock. It seemed that only now did Nietion reveal the astonishing power of his sword intent. Rumble. Bang, bang, bang. At this moment, a swift and fierce sword shadow whizzed out and bombarded the strangulation storm. After the void trembled for a moment, the strangulation storm was actually forcefully torn apart, collapsed, and exploded in the air. How is this possible? Seeing this scene, that person's eyes trembled, and he shouted in shock. In the next moment, he felt a terrifying power pressing down on him, and the fear on his face reached the extreme. Even in his dreams, he didn't expect Nietion's strength to be so terrifying. But at this moment, it was all too late. In the blink of an eye, the sword shadow fell, and that person's figure directly turned into a bloody light, and the smell of blood filled the martial arts arena. The shocking scene caused everyone's eyes to tremble, and they simultaneously gasped. They felt that even their tailbones were ice cold, and their gazes towards Nietion were filled with fear. Who would have thought that Nietion would be able to kill that assassin with a single swing of his sword? Why was Nietion's sword intent so terrifying? Your spirit formation and your killing intent are merely a bluff. An assassin like you should be proficient in assassination, not direct confrontation. Standing on the martial arts arena, Nietion said with a faint smile. This assassin gave off an extremely powerful feeling when he first stepped onto the martial arts arena. Unfortunately, he was only an empty shell. His spirit formation and killing intent were more frightening than anything else. However, Nietion was not afraid at all, at least when facing an 8th-layer heaven rhythm martial artist. Nietion wouldn't feel any fear. The eyes of the crowd trembled, and they were once again shocked by Nietion's strength. Brat, how dare you kill him? At this moment, a deep voice suddenly resounded in the air, like a sudden clap of thunder. The crowd was startled at the same time, and when they looked towards the source of the voice, they saw a black-robed martial artist standing in the air, emitting a chilling aura, like a 10,000-year-old iceberg. Instantly, the entire martial arts arena was shrouded by a terrifying killing intent. Nietion frowned, and his expression changed slightly. This time, it was real killing intent without the help of any other power. The black-robed martial artist's strength was far stronger than the assassin's. The appearance of this black-robed martial artist was clearly to kill Nietion. Sect Master of the Absolute Soul Sect, are you going to intervene? At this moment, another voice sounded. Su Cheng's figure appeared in the air, confronting the black-robed martial artist. When the crowd heard Su Cheng address the black-robed martial artist, their eyes trembled and they exclaimed, Sect Master of the Absolute Soul Sect. So this black-robed martial artist was actually the Sect Master of the Absolute Soul Sect. The Absolute Soul Sect was the largest assassin organization in the seventh sacred world of cultivators. They were mysterious and unfathomable, and they killed people for money. Who would have thought that even the Sect Master of the Absolute Soul Sect would personally come for this small sky wolf challenge? Actually, it wasn't strange. The Absolute Soul Sect killed people for money, and the Sky Wolf Challenge this time was so high that it was enough to tempt the Absolute Soul Sect. The Sect Master of the Absolute Soul Sect's eyes were like the abyss, flashing with a cold light as he coldly said, He killed my disciple. This Wolf King has already said that the rules of the Sky Wolf Challenge are that both parties are willing to die. Even if that person is your disciple, you can't break the rules of the Sky Wolf Challenge. Su Cheng coldly replied, very domineering. Humph. The Sect Master of the Absolute Soul Sect laughed coldly. He suddenly took a step forward and said coldly, Does your evil Moon Wolf Sect want to become enemies with the Absolute Soul Sect for a wolf slave? He didn't know Nie Tian's identity and treated Nie Tian as a wolf slave. Chapter 35:35. Victory. Boom. In the sky above the arena, two terrifying auras collided. There was a muffled sound as if two mountains had collided. Then, Su Cheng and the soul-severing Sect Master's figures swayed at the same time before stabilizing. Are these two going to fight? The crowd's eyes trembled violently as they shouted in surprise. They were clearly very excited. One of the two people in the sky was the Wolf King of the demonic Moon Wolf tribe, and the other was the soul-severing Sect Master. If they fought, it would be very exciting. At this moment, the soul-severing Sect Master's eyes were filled with killing intent. He looked at Su Cheng coldly and did not speak. Soul-severing Sect Master, this is the wolf slave field. It's not your turn to be arrogant. In the next moment, another voice sounded. Then, two figures descended and landed beside Su Cheng. They were the other two Wolf Kings of the wolf slave field. Three Wolf Kings appearing at the same time was definitely a very rare sight in the Wolf Night Mountain. The soul-severing Sect Master looked at the three of them with an extremely gloomy expression. If it was just Su Cheng alone, he might have a chance of winning. However, facing three Wolf Kings at the same time, he had no chance of winning. Soul-severing Sect Master, please leave this place. The wolf slave field does not welcome you. Su Cheng's expression darkened as he growled and stepped forward with an imposing manner. Good. Very good. The soul-severing Sect Master's expression darkened. He suddenly laughed wildly and said loudly, I will remember what happened today. After saying that, he did not stop. His figure moved like a ghost and disappeared in an instant. Su Cheng's gaze trembled slightly as he sensed the surrounding void. After confirming that the soul-severing Sect Master had left, he heaved a sigh of relief. Then his gaze swept across the crowd, and he said, Sky Picking Wolf, continue. The crowd trembled, and their faces became a little more nervous. What had just happened seemed to have nothing to do with them, but in fact, it made them understand one thing. Everyone who challenged Nie Tian had to be prepared for the worst. At least until the Sky Picking Wolf was over, the people of the demonic Moon Wolf sect would protect Nie Tian. Everyone knew that rather than saying that the demonic Moon Wolf sect was protecting Nie Tian, it was more accurate to say that the demonic Moon Wolf sect was protecting the wolf slave field. Evil Moon Tianlang had even offended the soul-severing sect. In that case, everyone who wanted to challenge him would have to consider it carefully. Then, the entire wolf slave field was silent for a long time. No one dared to step onto the stage. Nie Tian had even killed an assassin from the soul-severing sect. This was quite a shock to everyone. Following that, the stakes kept piling up. Finally, someone couldn't resist the temptation and started to play. However, although there was no lack of genius martial artists, all of them were defeated by Nyetian. A day later, Nyetian won another 20 rounds, accumulating a total of 95 rounds. At this moment, he only needed to win 5 more matches to take down the sky-picking wolf. At this moment, the Heavenly Wolf bet had reached a shocking number. More than 30 million top-grade Saint crystals, tens of thousands of Saint cores, Saint pills, Saint artifacts, Saint arrays, and other unexpected things. However, at this moment, no one continued to bet on Gao Tianlang. Everyone knew that the current serious bet was terrifying enough to tempt the hearts of martial artists. There was no point in continuing to bet on Gao Tianlang. The next 5 matches would be crucial. If Nyetian could hold on, he would create a miracle. After nearly 4 days and 95 battles, Nyetian's condition was very good. He was still at his peak, as if the previous battles were just games to him. He didn't even use up any energy. At this moment, everyone looked at Nyetian and couldn't help but discuss. This kid called Nyetian is too strong. He defeated so many high-level heavenly rhythm cultivators with his second-layer heavenly rhythm cultivation. How terrifying. I suspect that he's a descendant of a big family from a high-rank holy world. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so strong. Forget it. If he was a descendant of a big family, would he need to challenge the sky-picking wolf? I wonder what the next battle will be like. Who will be able to defeat him? As everyone discussed, they stared at Nyetian without blinking, as if they were worried that the latter would suddenly run away. In a distant corner, Shunhan stared at Nyetian with a blank expression on his face. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined that Nyetian would make it this far. Only now did he truly understand how terrifying Nyetian was. At this moment, Nyetian seemed to be a little anxious. He swept his gaze across the crowd and said loudly, "There's still 5 matches left. Who will fight next?" As soon as his voice fell, the response was dead silence. After witnessing his strength, no one dared to go up blindly. Most importantly, until now, Nyetian hadn't been injured, so he hadn't revealed his true strength. No one knew how strong he was. "Is there no one?" Nyetianling sneered and said provocatively, "There's still 1 more day. Do you want me to stand on the arena for the whole day?" This kid is too arrogant. The crowd frowned. Their faces were very ugly, and they all angrily rebuked. But they could only angrily rebuke. They didn't dare to go up. Nyetian was very arrogant, but he had the capital to be arrogant. "Nyetian, right? Let me experience just how strong you are." At this moment, a low voice sounded out, and then an unfamiliar figure appeared on the arena. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at Nyetian with an incomparably gloomy expression. "It's you." When Nyetian saw that person, his eyes slightly narrowed, and then the corner of his mouth twitched. He lightly called out the opponent's name, Yin Liujie. At this time, the person who appeared on the arena was none other than Yin Liujie, one of the 9 wolves like Su Kuanga. Previously, in the restaurant, Nyetian had a conflict with Yin Liujie. If Su Kuanga and Su Cheng hadn't appeared, the two would have had a big fight. And at that time, Yin Liujie wanted to kill Nyetian. He had come to the wolf slave field before, but he didn't make a move. Nyetian's performance shocked him. He wanted to watch a few more matches to thoroughly understand Nyetian. But at this moment, no one challenged him, so he couldn't wait any longer and personally went up to fight. Yin Liujie. Is Yin Liujie the 7 Wolves Mercenary Corps? Everyone looked at Yin Liujie. Their eyes trembled violently, blazing and excited. After the 95th match, a truly powerful genius finally appeared. One of the 9 wolves of Wolf Night, Yin Liujie. The appearance of Yin Liujie caused the audience to boil. After all, Yin Liujie was one of the 9 wolves, the top genius of Wolf's Night Mountain, and he had cultivated the 7 Wolves Mercenary Group's signature martial art, 7 Wolves Final Kill. If he attacked, Nyetian would be in danger. Chapter 35-36. Chapter 351. Chapter 351 Battle, Yin 6 Tribulations. The black-clothed martial artist's face was gloomy, and his wolf-like eyes locked onto Nyetian. He seemed to have determined that Nyetian would definitely lose. His aura was very strange. Although it was extremely restrained, it gave people an unfathomable feeling, as if his whole person was like an endless ocean. Not far from the black-clothed martial artist, Su Cheng stood coldly. When Su Cheng heard the words of the black-clothed martial artist, the corner of his mouth twitched, and he said indifferently, "Leader Huang Lang, the two of them haven't fought yet. Isn't it a bit too early for you to come to a conclusion?" This black-clothed martial artist had an extremely high status in Wolf's Night Mountain. He was the leader of the Seven Wolves Mercenary Corps. Moreover, he was also the teacher of Yin Liujia. Very few people knew his specific name. He was called Huang Lang. Even Su Cheng, in front of Huang Lang, did not dare to show too high of a posture, but spoke in an equal tone. "Humph." Huang Lang glanced at Su Cheng, sneered twice, and said, "It seems that Wolf King Su is very confident in this kid. With the strength that Nie Tian has shown, is there a need for me to have confidence in him?" Su Cheng smiled faintly, seemingly responding casually, but in fact, it showed that he had more confidence in Nie Tian. Let's wait and see." Huang Lang sneered, his eyes locked on the battle stage. "Nie Tian, I'm really surprised that you can persist until now. But your path of challenging the Heavenly Wolf ends here." Yin Liujia's eyes flashed with a cold light, and he said coldly, "But your path of challenging the Heavenly Wolf ends here. Is that so?" The corner of Nie Tian's mouth slightly raised, a playful look on his face. Yin Liujia's aura was indeed a lot more tyrannical than the previous people, and for him to be on par with someone like Su Kuanga, his strength was certainly not weak. However, Nie Tian was not afraid. He could defeat Su Kuanga, so he could also defeat Yin Liujia. "Nie Tian, I admire your confidence," Yin Liujia said coldly and smiled. "Unfortunately, no matter how great your confidence is, in the face of absolute power, it is vulnerable." Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward, and his aura surged out madly. It was as if a mountain was collapsing, and the entire arena was enveloped by an enormous force that rumbled incessantly. So strong, everyone's eyes trembled, and they couldn't help but exclaim. Yin Liujia was indeed extraordinary. The aura that erupted in an instant was already so terrifying. "Kill!" In the next moment, Yin Liujia let out a low roar, and the aura of his whole body suddenly skyrocketed to the extreme. Then, he struck out with his palm, and a terrifying dark wolf claw appeared. It was dark and sharp, as if to tear everything apart. The surrounding void suddenly sank, and it suppressed towards Nie Tian. "It's over." Seeing this scene, Huang Lang smiled faintly. He was extremely confident. As far as he was concerned, as long as that wolf claw descended, everything would be settled, and Nie Tian would die without a doubt. With Yin Liujia's ruthlessness, even if this wolf claw fell on a low-level heavenly mandate realm warrior, he would still end up with nothing left. Nie Tian's mere second-level heavenly Yun strength could not withstand it all. When Su Cheng saw this scene, his eyes suddenly tightened, and he was obviously very nervous. He didn't expect Yin Liujia's strength to be so terrifying. Even he could feel a slight pressure coming from it. Everyone's eyes also shrank, as if they had already seen the scene of Nie Tian being killed. Boom! But at this moment, a low rumbling sound rang out in the air. After that, a sword shadow whistled through the air, akin to the raging waves of the ocean. Its surging momentum shook the heavens and earth. Instantly, a muffled sound rang out in the air. That wolf claw of darkness was actually forcefully shattered. The sudden scene made Yin Liujia's eyes sink, and he exclaimed in surprise. However, what followed was a terrifying pressure that forced him to retreat hundreds of meters away. When he stabilized his figure, he saw a silver-haired figure standing in the void, like a sharp, unsheathed sword, with unparalleled sharpness. How is this possible? Yin Liujia's eyes trembled, and he let out a strange cry, obviously extremely shocked. At the same time, the smile on Huang Lang's face stopped abruptly, and his face froze. His whole body seemed to have been petrified, and he didn't react for a long time. He never thought that Nie Tian could actually block Yin Liujia's palm, and even forced Enliogia to retreat. How was this possible? Nietian clearly didn't have such powerful strength before. Then, Huang Lang suddenly discovered something, and his pupils shrank in horror, as if he had seen a ghost. He took a deep breath, and his face froze again. He couldn't believe that the sword momentum of Nietian's body had actually skyrocketed, and it had skyrocketed by more than several times. The realm of Nietian's sword Dao had actually improved. But how was this possible? Nietian was clearly at the first level of sword rhyme just now. How could he break through to the 5th level in the blink of an eye? Even if Nietian could break through, he could most break through 1 level. How could he suddenly advance by 4 levels? Just what was going on? What kind of terrifying power was in Nietian's body? Su Cheng's face wasn't much better than Huang Lang's, and he was equally shocked. Even powerhouses like them had never seen someone who could instantly improve the realm of Sword Dao. The crowd looked at Nietian, and they were all stunned, unable to react for a long time. Only now did they realize that they had underestimated Nietian. How could your realm be? On the arena, Enliogia looked at Nietian, his eyes trembling, obviously too shocked. He was the closest to Nietian, so he could feel the changes in Nietian's sword momentum and sword intent the most vividly. Nietian's sword momentum skyrocketed by several times in almost an instant, which was too terrifying. Enliogia, do you still have the confidence you had just now? Nietian looked at Enliogia and smiled faintly, appearing very provocative. Insolence. Enliogia's eyes darkened, and he immediately calmed down. With a low roar, his whole body's aura was released crazily, and a terrifying force, like a storm, circulated outside his body, surging violently. Come on. Nietian smiled faintly, without the slightest fear, and his eyes were full of fighting spirit. He also wanted to test how strong his current strength was through Enliogia's hands. Ice Wolf, kill. Right at this moment, Enliogia let out a furious roar, and all the power in his body instantly burst forth. Waves of terrifying power actually carried a frigid aura and rolled out like a tsunami. Suddenly, a giant white wolf appeared in the air. It looked as if it was carved out of ice and exuded a bone-chilling aura as it fiercely pounced towards Nietian. Ice attribute power, a little interesting. Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he smiled faintly. Starlight heavenly slash streaked across the sky, and the sword light shot out tens of thousands of meters away, and a sword shadow cut through the void, killing the ice wolf. Flame wolf, kill. At that moment, Enliogia let out another bellow, and the frost power he was wreathed and turned into flames in the blink of an eye, burning the void. Immediately afterwards, a huge crimson wolf pounced towards Nietian like a ball of fire. Huh! The sudden change made Nietian's eyes narrow, and he was surprised. Chapter 35-37. Roar! 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 On the arena, Enliogia's ice wolf and flame wolf attacked at the same time. The two giant wolves roared like thunder and burst out with the power of ice and fire in the air, pouncing at Nietian. Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly. Enliogia's means were beyond his expectations and caught him off guard. 8 Desolation's sword. But in the next moment, he regained his composure and roared. The sword intent in his body surged out like a stormy sea. On the starry heavenly slash, the sword light shone brightly, and a terrifying sword shadow let out a sword cry, like an enraged wild beast, and rushed out. Boom! In the next moment, the domineering sword fell and collided with the two giant wolves at the same time. There was a muffled sound in the void, and the space suddenly sank as if it was about to collapse. So strong. Seeing the scene on the arena, everyone's eyes trembled and they exclaimed. Nietian's sword was incomparably powerful and actually blocked the ice and fire wolves at the same time. This kid's sword intent is terrifying. Huang Lang looked at Nietian and felt the fluctuation of sword intent coming from the void. His eyes trembled slightly, and his heart was filled with shock. Even if he couldn't wait for Nietian to be directly killed by Enliogia, he had to admit that Nietian's sword intent was indeed very terrifying. There was a sharpness in the majesty, and every sword strike seemed to tear the void. Boom! Bang, bang, bang. At this moment, a violent explosion sounded. The sword shadow and the ice and fire wolves collapsed at the same time, turning into endless violent force that rushed in all directions. Immediately, the figures of Niet Tian and Yin Liuja burst back at the same time and directly retreated to the edge of the arena. Huh! Yin Liuja steadied his body and exclaimed in surprise. He looked at Niet Tian with a pair of incomparably vicious eyes and said coldly, Niet Tian, you can actually resist my twin wolves. It seems that I have underestimated you. If that's all you have, then I'll have overestimated you. Niet Tian smiled faintly, his calmness carrying an undisguised sarcasm. Yin Liuja's ice and fire wolves were indeed very strong. In an instant, they erupted, causing the opponent to suffer the coldness of ice and the blazing fire at the same time. It was as if they were in a land of ice and fire. It was a great blow to a martial artist's martial body. However, Niet Tian was not afraid. Just the power of ice and fire could not harm his martial body. However, he knew that Yin Liuja hadn't used his true power yet. If it was only the ice and fire twin wolves, Yin Liuja was not qualified to stand side by side with Su Kuanga. Niet Tian, you've angered me. Yin Liuja let out a low roar, completely enraged, and the aura of his whole body once again soared wildly. The aura of the dual attributes of ice and fire separated in an extremely strange manner, surrounding his body like a storm of ice and fire, filling the surrounding space with an extremely terrifying, strangling power, as if to grind everything. His aura is even stronger now. Niet Tian felt waves of ice blades and waves of fire rushing toward his face, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble slightly. Yin Liujia's strength was really not weak. This kind of terrible power of ice and fire, even a heavenly mandate realm expert would not be able to withstand it calmly. Go to hell! Yin Liujia roared like thunder, and the aura of his whole body was released wildly in an instant. Suddenly, the ice wolf and the fire wolf appeared at the same time. The aura was even more powerful than before, hitting the void, extremely terrifying. Boom! Boom! The two giant wolves of ice and fire, like two giant mountains, pounced on Niet Tian. The amazing aura seemed to be able to crush the world. Niet Tian frowned and was surprised that Yin Liujia could use the power of ice and fire at the same time. Moreover, when the two forces were combined, there was no conflict at all. Instead, they stimulated each other and burst out with a stronger power. It had to be said that Yin Liujia's control of power was indeed very terrifying. 9 limits of starry sky, heavenly slash. The next moment, Niet Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and the starry heavenly slash crossed the void. The sword intent was like a dazzling waterfall, released, and the sword shadow was like a mountain, blasting toward the two giant wolves. Boom! Boom! Chi, chi, chi. In the void, the extreme powers collided. Time and space trembled, and the sky changed color. Terrifying rumbling sounds rang out. Endless wild power was like a raging wave that covered the sky, wreaking havoc in the void as if it wanted to destroy the world. Niet Tian and Yin Liujia both retreated almost at the same time and were once again forced to the edge of the arena. After the two stabilized their figures, they looked at each other, but their expressions were completely different. Niet Tian looked indifferent, while Yin Liujia was murderous as if he wanted to eat someone. Moreover, Niet Tian was safe and sound, but Yin Liujia was injured with blood spilling from the corner of his mouth. Yin Liujia is injured. When everyone saw this scene, they couldn't help but tremble and exclaim. No one expected that Yin Liujia would be injured. Originally, everyone thought that with Yin Liujia's strength, Niet Tian would be unable to resist. But the fact was that Niet Tian was not at a disadvantage in the confrontation with Yin Liujia. This kid, what a strong martial body. Outside the arena, Huang Lang's eyes flickered, staring at Niet Tian with a horrified expression. He could see that the strength of Nyetian and Enliogia was almost the same, but Nyetian's martial body was stronger than Enliogia's. Therefore, under the impact of the same power, Nyetian could be safe and sound, while Enliogia was injured. Off to the side, Su Cheng's eyes flickered with excitement and astonishment as he asked, Nyetian, what's your limit? Although he had confidence in Nyetian, he didn't expect Nyetian to be so terrifying. The other two wolf kings next to him trembled. They were even more shocked than him. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they really couldn't believe that a second-level heaven rhythm warrior could be so terrifying. Nyetian, I'm not as good as you. On the other side, Su Kuanga looked at Nyetian with trembling eyes, unable to hide the sadness on his face, and said in a heavy heart. He could see that Nyetian was even more terrifying than when he fought with him before. He knew that Nyetian's true strength had not been revealed yet. At this time, he was truly convinced and admitted that he was not as good as Nyetian. He was one of the 9 wolves, the peak genius of Wolf's Night Mountain. He had a proud temperament. At this time, he admitted that he was not as good as Nyetian, which showed how terrifying Nyetian was. Enliogia, is that all your strength? At this time, Nyetian's voice sounded calm and indifferent, but it was extremely harsh in Enliogia's ears. Damn it, Enliogia growled, and his whole body's aura burst out like a stormy sea. Suddenly, a shocking aura circulated around his body. That terrifying aura seemed to be able to devour the heavens and earth. Come on, let me see your strongest power. Feeling Enliogia's aura, the corner of Nyetian's mouth twitched slightly, and there was a trace of excitement in his eyes. The stronger Enliogia was, the happier he was. Only a strong opponent was qualified to make him use his true strength. Wind. Enliogia's eyes were filled with murderous intent as he spoke sinisterly. Suddenly, a sharp aura of wind gushed out from his body and whistled through the air, making him look like a huge storm. Huh. Seeing this scene, Nyetian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he was surprised. Chapter 35-38. It ends here, the third kind of power. Nyetian felt the fluctuation of power in the void. His eyes trembled slightly, and he was surprised. He didn't expect that Enliogia could use a third kind of power in addition to ice and fire. This person's understanding and control of power was really terrifying. Nyetian, you can block my 2 wolves, but can you block my 3 wolves? In midair, Enliogia's whole body was full of killing intent. He said coldly, and suddenly 3 forces appeared in the void at the same time. One was ice, one was flame, and one was a storm. Ice wolf, flame wolf, wind wolf, kill. Then, Enliogia roared like thunder, and the power of his whole body suddenly broke out. The 3 forces in the void evolved into 3 giant wolves, like mountains, and the space trembled under the pressure. Roar, roar, roar. In the next moment, the 3 giant wolves roared at the same time, and then moved at the same time. Suddenly, 3 terrifying suppressive forces, like a strangling storm, pressed down on Nyetian. Nyetian's eyes narrowed slightly. He clearly felt that the power in the void was much more tyrannical than before. Under the urging of the power of wind, the power of ice and fire of Enliogia became even more terrifying. Nyetian, you're dead. In the void, Enliogia let out a crazy sneer, and his pair of eyes became extremely red under extreme anger, which was very terrifying. The eyes of the crowd trembled, and they were extremely shocked. Enliogia was indeed one of the 9 wolves. He could actually burst out such a terrifying power. This time, Nyetian absolutely couldn't resist. Drainage, you're too confident. At this time, Nyetian's voice sounded, and under the impact of the violent power, it seemed harsh. Boom! In the next moment, the aura of his whole body was released crazily, and suddenly a terrible sword intent appeared, as if it was going to split the sky and earth, and hit the void as if it was going to explode. At the same time, there was an additional force in the void, and Nyetian's sword intent was pushed to the extreme. Sword sealing forbidden formation. Sword dragon annihilation. In the next moment, Nyetian opened his mouth and his lips curled into a cold smile. Sword runes appeared beneath his feet, causing the sword within his body to become violent and sharp. Roar! Immediately after, a low dragon roar rang out as a dragon made of sword intent appeared, coiling around in the air, exuding an imposing aura that shook the heavens and earth. It was as though it was the ruler of this world. What a terrifying power! The crowd's eyes trembled when they saw this. The shock in their hearts was at its peak. It was hard to imagine that Nyetian had actually used the power of the sword formation to enhance the power of his sword intent. Boom! Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At this moment, under the watchful eyes of countless people, the sword dragon and the three wolves of ice, fire, and wind collided head-on. The void suddenly trembled, and a terrifying force exploded, spreading in all directions. The crowd was dumbfounded. It was hard to imagine that the battle in front of them was between two heavenly aura cultivators. Even a low-level warrior of the heavenly mandate realm would not be able to withstand such a terrifying battle. Bang! Bang! After a while, two muffled sounds came from the void, and two figures flew out from the endless waves, looking very embarrassed. These two figures were Nyetian and Enliogia. However, Nyetian's figure immediately stabilized in the void. There was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth, but his aura was still sharp, like a peerless sword, incomparably sharp. On the other hand, Enliogia was dripping with blood, and his body was trembling slightly. He seemed to have suffered a serious injury. Even Nyetian was injured by that kind of impact just now, so Enliogia was even more unable to withstand it. However, Enliogia's aura was still there at this time. His eyes were red and bloodshot, staring at Nyetian like a wolf. He didn't expect that even if he used the three wolves, he still wouldn't be able to kill Nyetian. He didn't understand why Nyetian's combat strength was so terrifying when he was only in the second tier of heavenly aura. At this moment, he looked at Nyetian. In addition to resentment, there was also a trace of unconcealable fear in his heart. Enliogia, do you still want to fight? At this time, Nyetian asked with a faint smile, with a hint of provocation. At this time, anyone could see that Enliogia was at an absolute disadvantage. If he continued to fight, the result would be predictable. Fight! Enliogia looked at Nyetian. His pupils suddenly shrank, and he roared like a beast. The aura of his whole body surged wildly, and his eyes were extremely sharp. Enliogia is so seriously injured. Does he still want to fight? Seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help but tremble and exclaim. In order to kill Nyetian, Enliogia didn't even care about his own life. Nyetian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he said, "Humph, if you want to fight, I will accompany you to the end." At this time, he hoped that Enliogia could retreat and take the initiative to admit defeat. He didn't want to continue fighting because he didn't want to consume too much energy. After all, there were still 4 battles waiting for him. But if Enliogia didn't know what was good for him, Nyetian didn't mind killing him. Nyetian, Enliogia will kill you today. Enliogia roared like thunder, and the aura of his whole body was released crazily, and a bloody aura was released. Feeling this aura fluctuation, Nyetian couldn't help but tremble, and his heart was filled with surprise. It seemed that Enliogia was releasing a strange bloodline power. Nyetian, do you think the 7 wolves' final kill is only this? Enliogia said in a low voice, and the evil killing intent in his eyes was about to burst out. He seemed to have gone mad, and his eyes were filled with bloody, killing intent. Nyetian frowned and couldn't help but shake his head. He really didn't understand why Enliogia would have such great resentment. In fact, there was no grudge between him and Enliogia. To put it bluntly, in a restaurant, the two were just quarreling. Nyetian didn't care at all, but Enliogia regarded him as an enemy who would not rest until he was dead, which made him feel puzzled. Boom! At this moment, a terrifying aura surged out from Enliogia's body, and it was actually several times stronger than before. In Liujia, so this is your real strength. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched, and he said in a deep voice. It seemed that In Liujia was going to use his final trump card. The eyes of the crowd trembled, looking forward to In Liujia's next move. Enough. However, at this moment, a low voice suddenly sounded, and everyone was stunned. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice, and the person who spoke turned out to be In Liujia's teacher, the leader of the Seven Wolves mercenary group, Huang Lang. Teacher, In Liujia suddenly raised his head, and his eyes trembled as he shouted, Liujia, this battle is over. Come back. Huang Lang looked at In Liujia and said indifferently, and in his calm tone, there was an inviolable dominance. But In Liujia's eyes trembled, and he was very unwilling to give up, but he still wanted to persist. Chapter 35-39. Chapter 35-34. Chapter 35-34 Hell. Huang Lang said in a low voice, looking at In Liujia with unquestionable eyes. Yes, In Liujia's eyes trembled, but he finally nodded and the aura around his body dissipated. He really wanted to kill Nye Tian at this time, but he didn't dare to disobey Huang Lang's words. Nye Tian, consider yourself lucky. In Liujia glanced at Nye Tian with a cold and sinister gaze. After saying that, his figure moved and directly left the arena, returning to Huang Lang's side. Am I lucky? Nye Tian looked at In Liujia with a faint smile and didn't comment. The aura displayed by In Liujia just now was indeed very terrifying, but it wasn't to the point where Nye Tian was afraid. If In Liujia really made a move, it was hard to say what the result would be. Huang Lang stopping In Liujia was out of Nye Tian's expectation. However, it wasn't strange. After all, the Night of Wolf contest was about to begin. Huang Lang might think that it was better for In Liujia to save his strength for the contest. Teacher, why did you stop me? At this time, In Liujia returned to Huang Lang's side, his eyes slightly trembling, and he asked unwillingly, Liujia, that move of yours was used to take the leader of the Night of Wolf contest, not to kill this kid. You've already injured him, and that's enough. Someone will take this kid's life. Huang Lang smiled faintly, and as he spoke, he turned his gaze to the other side. There were two figures standing in his line of sight. One was a middle-aged man, and the other was a young man. It's them. In Liujia couldn't help but exclaim when he saw the two people. He didn't expect the Ghost Wolf mercenary group to also come. These two figures were none other than the leader of the Ghost Wolf mercenary group and the #1 genius of the Ghost Wolf mercenary group, Liang Gui. The Ghost Wolf mercenary group was a mercenary group on par with the Seven Wolves mercenary group in the Night of Wolf Mountain, and the #1 genius of the Ghost Wolf mercenary group, Liang Gui, was also one of the 9 wolves, just like In Liujia. In Liujia didn't expect the leader of the Ghost Wolf mercenary group and Liang Gui to also come here. It was obvious that the two of them had seen the battle just now. In Liujia naturally understood that the person who took Nye Tian's life was Liang Gui. Brother In, you've lost this battle. I'll help you win it back. At this moment, Liang Gui also noticed In Liujia. He took a step forward and said with a faint smile. In Liujia's face was gloomy, and he did not speak. Liang Gui's words were obviously mocking him. He had exchanged blows with Liang Gui several times. Both of them had wins and losses, and their strengths were about the same. At this moment, Liang Gui was about to fight Nye Tian. He had a huge advantage. On one hand, Nye Tian was slightly injured. On the other hand, he had seen Nye Tian's previous attack, so he was already prepared. It seemed that Liang Gui was very confident in his battle with Nye Tian. I'm going. Seeing that In Liujia did not speak, Liang Gui laughed even more proudly. Then, his figure moved and went directly to the arena. Damn it, that kid got lucky. In Liujia looked at Liang Gui's figure with a pair of extremely gloomy eyes and cursed. Liujia, don't worry about it. The leader of the Wolf Knight is your ultimate goal. You must get that thing for me. The leader of the Ghost Wolves, Gui Shan, looked at In Liujia and secretly transmitted his voice to him. Yes, don't worry. Liujia will not let you down. Liujia nodded and said solemnly. He knew that the reward for the leader of the Wolf Knight contest was a very special thing, which was exactly what Gue Shan needed. It was precisely because of this that Gue Shan did not let Liujia fight. He did not want any accidents to happen to the latter before the Coal Knight contest. For more matches. At this moment, the eyes of the crowd trembled, and they all looked very excited. If he won 4 more matches, Nietian would be able to take the Sky Wolf Challenge this time. As one of the 9 wolves, Liujia was defeated by Nietian. Who else would dare to challenge Nietian next? Look, it's Liang Gue. Just as the crowd was puzzled, someone saw Liang Gue's figure and could not help but exclaim, "It's really Liang Gue." The eyes of the others trembled, and their expressions changed. Who would have thought that after Liujia, another 9-wolf martial artist would appear and challenge Nietian? As one of the 9 wolves, Liang Gue's strength was not weaker than Liujia's. If he were to fight, there would be a high chance of winning. After all, Nietian had also suffered some injuries after the previous battle, and his strength and trump cards were almost fully displayed. At least in the eyes of the crowd, Nietian's strength was approaching the limit. What they did not know was that Nietian's true terrifying strength had not been used yet. Nietian looked at Liang Gue, and his expression changed slightly. He sensed an extremely dark power from the latter, and it was very terrifying. Nietian, I will end your path to the Sky Wolf Challenge. Liang Gue took a step forward and looked at Nietian coldly. Just you. Nietian immediately calmed down and said with a calm smile, "How much stronger are you compared to Liujia?" "Humph." Liang Gue let out a mocking laugh and said, "Nietian, you're quite confident. However, overconfidence is considered arrogance." "Is that so?" Niet Tianling let out a hollow laugh and said, "Let's fight then." "Sure." Liang Gue let out a smile once again, before he took a step forward. Instantly, a terrifying force was unleashed, causing the surrounding space to sink and the entire stage to tremble. Following this, a tremendous force of darkness descended upon the stage like a boundless hell, crushing down on Nietian. Hell of 8 desolation. Everyone felt the evil aura coming from the space, and their eyes trembled with fear as they cried out in alarm. Rumors had it that Liang Gue had cultivated the Hell of 8 Desolation art, which allowed him to unleash the Hell of 8 Desolation, killing a cultivator straight away. No one had expected Liang Gue to use the Hell of 8 Desolation right away. It was obvious that he was planning to kill Nietian right away. This guy is trying to kill Nietian in an instant. Liujia's eyes flickered with a dark expression. He had fought against Liang Gue several times. Thus he knew how powerful the latter was. Normal cultivators had no chance against the Hell of 8 Desolation, especially those who were fighting against Liang Gue for the first time. They could easily be killed if they were caught off guard. It was obvious that Liang Gue was trying to kill Nietian by surprise, to show the crowd his terrifying strength. "Nietian, I will kill you with the Hell of 8 Desolation. Accept your death." Liang Gue's deep voice was heard from the sky, filled with murderous intent. Bang! In the sky, the chi of 8 Desolation surged toward him like a tidal wave. A giant dark vortex appeared, as if it was the source of all darkness, crushing down on Nietian. Nice move. Nietian could feel the incoming force, causing his gaze to freeze. His lips twitched as he said with a strange smile, "Unfortunately, it doesn't work on me." Chapter 3540. Get lost. Is that kid crazy? The crowd screamed in astonishment when they saw Nietian charging straight into the whirlpool of the 8 Desolation Hell. Everyone could sense that the 8 Desolation chi was the strongest inside the whirlpool. Thus, it was definitely the most dangerous place. Nietian charging straight into it was no different from asking for death. Liang Gue's eyes flickered upon seeing this. His face was not filled with joy, but astonishment or even fear. He did not expect Nietian to charge straight into the 8 Desolation heart. How is this possible? Gue Shan's eyes widened as his face was filled with astonishment, as if he was in a panic. Could it be that Nye Tian had figured out that the key to breaking through the 8 Desolation Hell was the 8 Desolation Heart? The whirlpool was the 8 Desolation Heart, which was also the key to breaking through the 8 Desolation Hell. The 8 Desolation Heart had the strongest aura, which was extremely intimidating. Ordinary cultivators would not dare to get close to it. However, Nye Tian did the exact opposite and charged straight into the 8 Desolation Heart. There could only be one explanation for such a crazy move. Nye Tian could tell that the 8 Desolation Heart was the key to breaking through the 8 Desolation Hell. But how did he know that? It was his first time seeing the 8 Desolation Hell. Were his senses and comprehension really that terrifying? Gue Shan could not figure it out. His face turned extremely dark and unpleasant. At this time, the martial stage was filled with dense, desolate qi. Those who were close to the martial stage could feel a terrifying, oppressive aura. However, after Tian's figure disappeared, he did not reappear, causing the crowd to have strange looks on their faces. Nye Tian, is he going to die just like that? The crowd's eyes were trembling, as they could not accept the fact. Nye Tian had shocked the crowd too much previously. It was unbelievable that he had died just like that. Bang! However, at that instant, the 8 Desolation Hell vibrated vigorously with a loud bang, as if it was about to collapse. What's going on? Everyone's eyes widened in shock, not knowing what was going on. Oh no! Liang Gui's pupils constricted. He knew that something was wrong, and his expression was extremely ugly. He could not believe that Nye Tian's martial body could withstand the impact of the heart of 8 Desolation. Boom! Bang, bang, bang. At that moment, an explosion could be heard as the entire 8 Desolation Hell collapsed. Streams of 8 Desolation qi spread out in all directions like a space-time storm. How is this possible? The crowd's eyes trembled as they exclaimed in unison. They couldn't believe their eyes. How could the 8 Desolation Hell, which was as stable as a mountain, collapse in an instant? Bang! In the next moment, a muffled sound was heard. Liang Gui seemed to have been hit by an invisible force. His body trembled, and he was sent flying, leaving a trail of blood in the air. The sudden turn of events caused the crowd to gasp in shock. They had no idea what was going on. At that moment, Nye Tian's figure appeared. Like a sharp sword, he stood coldly in the air, emanating a sharp aura. Nye Tian has destroyed Liang Gui's 8 Desolation Hell. What's going on? The crowd was astounded, as if they were in an illusion. Meanwhile, the 3 Wolf Kings, the 2 leaders of the Wild Wolf Ghost Mountain, and many experts were stunned by the scene before them. They were speechless for a long time. Could it be that the heart of 8 Desolation is the key to destroying the 8 Desolation Hell? Liujia was stunned for a long time. His eyes were trembling as he exclaimed in his heart. He had fought against Liang Gui several times, and he had to spend a lot of energy to resist the 8 Desolation Qi. He could only suppress the 8 Desolation Hell, but Nye Tian was able to destroy it directly. It was unbelievable. How could Nye Tian be so terrifying to be able to discover the weakness of the 8 Desolation Hell with a single glance? Su Kuanga was stunned as well. He had the same thought as Liujia. How did you know? At that moment, Liang Gui managed to stabilize his body. He asked in shock despite the serious injuries on his body. How did I know the weakness of the 8 Desolation Hell? Nye Tian smiled and said, It's just a barrier. What's so difficult about it? A barrier. That's right. The 8 Desolation Hell was a barrier, and the heart of 8 Desolation was the eye of the barrier. Nye Tian relied on the perception of the eternal night demon fox to sense the strangeness of the heart of 8 Desolation. Moreover, the Ghost Emperor was still around, so he was certain that the heart of 8 Desolation was the eye of the barrier. Liang Gui's eyes trembled in shock. He was speechless for a moment. The 8 Desolation Hell that he was most proud of was so weak, in Nye Tian's words. How did you resist the 8 Desolation Qi? Liang Gui's eyes trembled as he asked again. Even if Nie Tian could tell that the heart of 8 Desolation was the eye of the barrier, the 8 Desolation chi inside the heart of 8 Desolation was extremely strong. How could Nie Tian, who was only at the 2nd level of heavenly aura, resist it? Your Desolation chi poses no threat to me at all. Nie Tian let out a cold laugh, looking incomparably arrogant. His martial body was already strong, and the power of the Way of Heaven had a strong restraining effect on the 8 Desolation chi, so he was completely unafraid of it. Not to mention that Liang Gui was at the 9th level of heavenly aura. Even if he was a heavenly mandate realm expert, he would still be no match for Nie Tian. Nie Tian's power had an absolute suppression over him. I puffed. Liang Gui's eyes trembled. He was so angry that he couldn't say a word and spat out a mouthful of blood. You're worse than Yin Liujia. Get lost. Nie Tianling laughed and said. Liang Gui's eyes trembled. He was unwilling to give up, but he still left the stage. He was already lucky that Nie Tian didn't kill him. If he continued to fight, he would be courting death. The crowd watched Liang Gui leave the stage. Many of them were still in a daze. High up in the sky, the experts fixed their eyes on Nie Tian, their faces filled with shock. Nie Tian still had 3 rounds left. He only needed to win 3 more rounds to defeat the sky-picking wolf. Xiao Chen had already defeated 2 9-wolf cultivators in a row. What kind of genius would dare to challenge him next? Nie Tian is too strong. I'm afraid no one can stop him from defeating the sky-picking wolf. The crowd whispered, thinking that no one would be able to stop Nie Tian in the next 3 rounds. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Nie Tian's mouth as he ran his gaze across the crowd. At this moment, he actually hoped that a stronger opponent would show up. Let me have a taste of your strength. Right at this moment, a clear and pleasant voice resounded, and then a blue-clothed figure appeared and descended gracefully onto the arena. Nie Tian suddenly raised his head and saw a girl in blue. His expression could not help but change. The blue-clothed girl looked very young, as if she was not even as old as Wen Xiang. Her facial features were exquisite, and her skin was extremely smooth. Her eyes flickered with a clear light, as if she was a fairy who did not eat the food of the mortal world. She was the most beautiful woman Nie Tian had seen since coming to the Saint's world. However, her appearance was not what Nie Tian paid attention to the most. What shocked Nie Tian the most was her strength. She was actually at the 9th level of heavenly aura. Chapter 35-41. Unstoppable, the Oracle Realm. Nie Tian looked at the girl in blue and couldn't help but be shocked. This was the first time he had seen such a young Oracle swordsman, and this Oracle swordsman turned out to be a young girl. The appearance of the girl in blue also surprised the surrounding crowd, and they began to discuss among themselves. Who is this girl? She actually dares to challenge Nie Tian at this time. This girl looks very young, but she's already at the 9th layer of heavenly yin. Her talent is so strong. Her talent in the way of the sword is even stronger. She's already at the 1st layer of the Oracle Realm. Could it be that she's even stronger than Yin Liujia and Liang Gui? As the crowd discussed, the way they looked at the girl in blue slightly changed. There was some fear and some excitement. Such a young Oracle swordsman was indeed terrifying. The stronger the girl in blue was, the greater the hope of defeating Nie Tian. This made the crowd even more excited. However, the strange thing was that no one recognized the girl in blue even though there were so many people present. With her talent, she should be a top genius of the 7th sacred world of cultivators. There were countless experts present, and they were all big shots from various sects, but no one recognized the girl in blue. Your name is Nie Tian, right? At this moment, the girl in blue spoke. Her voice was calm and ethereal. It was very pleasant and could instantly attract the attention of others, making them want to continue listening. Emachum. Nie Tian's response was very plain, and he only nodded. My name is Lan Zhuiying. Lan Zhuiying smiled and introduced herself. She then smiled gently and said, You've already won 97 battles. You only need 3 more to defeat the Heavenly Wolf. However, I'm sorry, but I can't let you continue. His calm voice caused everyone's eyes to tremble. They were extremely shocked. Anyone could hear the confidence in Lan Zhuying's tone. You're very confident, but no one can stop my path. Tian looked at Lan Zhuiying, and the corner of his mouth twitched. Aside from confidence, there was also a bit of domineeringness. This challenge to the celestial wolf didn't just concern his own life, but also Duanmu Lu and his other disciples. For himself, for Duanmu Lu and the others, Tian must win. You're also very confident. I like confident opponents. Lan Zhuiying faintly smiled, the corners of her mouth slightly raised. There was no killing intent in her eyes, but there was a kind of soul-shaking deterrence in her eyes. Make your move. Tian narrowed his eyes and said, All right. Lan Zhuiying nodded calmly. In the next instant, her smiling face turned solemn. Outside her body, surging sword was released, hitting the void space. It was extremely sharp, as if it was going to tear the world apart. What a strong sword intent. Tian's pupils constricted slightly as he sensed an extremely strong threat from the fluctuations of sword intent in the air. Tian, let's see if you can handle my first attack. Just then, Lan Zhuiying's voice rang out. Her silhouette stood in the air, like a peerless sword, sharp and blinding. Whoosh! In the next instant, an ice-blue sword appeared in her hand. Holding in her hand, it was like flowing water, crystal clear. However, the sword was emitting a chilling intent that seemed to be able to penetrate one's soul. Moon over the azure sea, triple wave. Then, Lan Zhuiying spoke softly. The sword in her hand swirled in the air, and immediately, 3 giant waves that resembled giant beasts appeared and charged towards Tian. Tian's eyes narrowed and his heart shuddered. Lan Zhuiying's sword intent was extremely strange. It looked extremely powerful, but in reality, it was extremely sharp. Within the 3 giant waves, there was a sharp aura that seemed to be able to kill everything. What a terrifying sword move. Feeling the terrifying aura in the space, the crowd could not help but exclaim in shock. The aura of the sword was enough to prove that Lan Zhuiying was much more terrifying than Yin Liujia and Liang Gue. Sacred heaven-defying sword, unity of heaven and human, sacrifice of the sun. Immediately after, Tian reacted. The starlight heavenly slash streaked across the sky and directly slashed out. A terrifying sword shadow appeared, and the terrifying aura it exuded caused the void to tremble, as though it was about to collapse. Tian could feel how terrifying Lan Zhuiying was. If any one of the 3 giant waves were to hit him head-on, it would be enough to injure him severely. Therefore, he did not hesitate to use the unity of heaven and human move. Boom! In the next instant, the sword shadow collided with the 3 giant waves, causing the space to tremble. It was as if the entire world was about to be destroyed. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Bang! Then, under the watchful eyes of countless people, the sword shadow forcibly tore the 3 giant waves apart. However, at the same time, it could not sustain the impact of the giant waves and directly collapsed. Tian's eyes trembled slightly. At the place where the void collapsed, endless power raged, causing the space to fall into chaos. After a while, his figure retreated rapidly and stopped a few thousand meters away. He was extremely shocked. He had blocked Lan Zhuiying's first move, but it was very difficult. On the other hand, Lan Zhuiying had only casually swung her sword, which showed how powerful she was. That girl in blue is so terrifying. The crowd was shocked and exclaimed. They were shocked by Lan Zhuiying's strength. Although Lan Zhuiying's sword did not defeat Tian, it forced Tian back a few thousand meters. It was enough to show how terrifying her strength was. High up in the sky, Su Cheng looked at Lan Zhuiying. His eyes trembled slightly as he thought to himself, who is this girl in blue? Whether it was talent or strength, the girl in blue was far above Yin Liujia and Liang Gue. However, Su Cheng had never heard of such a monstrous person in the 7th sacred cultivator's world of cultivators. The other 2 wolf kings were also shocked and had the same doubt in their eyes as Su Cheng. The other powerhouses, such as Huang Lang, Gue Shan, and the others also did not know the origin of the girl in blue. They could only be secretly surprised. At this time, Lan Zhuing looked at Nie Tian and could not help but exclaim in surprise. Then, a look of pleasant surprise appeared on her face. She smiled and said, Nie Tian, you actually blocked my first move. Nie Tian looked at Lan Zhuing and could not help but frown. Although Lan Zhuing was surprised, she gave Nie Tian a feeling that she was even more arrogant. It turned out that in her eyes, Nie Tian should not have been able to block even one move from her. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched as he said coldly, "Continue with your second move." Okay. Lan Zhuing seemed to be a little excited at this moment. She said, Nie Tian, you're the most interesting person I have ever seen. If you can block 2 more moves from me, I will admit defeat. 2 moves? Nie Tian frowned. The corner of his mouth twitched coldly as he said, "You are too confident." Lan Zhuing was indeed too confident. She was certain that Nie Tian would not be able to block 3 moves from her. Nie Tian, the first move just now was a casual one. It was just a test. Lan Zhuing smiled faintly and said, "You have to be careful with the next 2 moves." As her voice faded, her body slightly moved. Suddenly, the sword aura around her body exploded and became several times stronger than before. Chapter 3542. Sword spirit body in the air above the martial stage. Lan Zhuing's entire body's sword force exploded out. At the same time, her eyes actually had a strange change, continuously releasing rays of blue light. Outside her eyes, they formed many ice blue runes that floated in the air, looking extremely strange. When Ye Tian saw this scene, he could not help but narrow his eyes and let out a cry of surprise. Could Lan Zhuing be a martial artist with other pupils? Lan Zhuing's eyes were strange. She did look like a martial artist with other pupils, but Nie Tian couldn't sense any eye power from her eyes. Instead, he sensed a powerful sword intent. That pair of eyes seemed to contain a bottomless abyss of sword intent, which was exceptionally terrifying. Nie Tian couldn't understand why Lan Zhuing's eyes could emit such a terrifying sword intent. Don't tell me. Just as he was feeling confused, the Ghost Emperor's voice rang out. Sword spirit body. The Ghost Emperor paused for a moment before continuing. A sword spirit? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and he couldn't help but go blank. He had never heard of sword spirit body before. It sounded like a special martial body. The so-called sword spirit body is an extremely rare bloodline martial body. The Ghost Emperor was silent for a moment before he explained, "Martial artists with sword spirit body have the sword intent of heaven and earth in their blood. It could even be said that their entire body is filled with sword intent. Rumor has it that when a sword spirit body is developed to the extreme, their entire body will be filled with sword intent. They can merge with the heaven and earth and comprehend the supreme sword intent of heaven and earth." Nie Tian's eyes flickered, and his expression froze slightly. So terrifying. This girl's sword spirit body is different from ordinary sword spirit bodies. Her eyes were the first to awaken the sword intent of heaven and earth. This is too strange. The Ghost Emperor frowned and said. He also found it strange that Lan Zhuing's eyes were the first to awaken the sword intent of heaven and earth. It seems that the next 2 moves won't be easy. Nie Tian's eyes darkened as he stared at Lan Zhuing. No wonder Lan Zhuing was so confident. She had a sword spirit body. The crowd looked at Lan Zhuing, their eyes trembling in shock. Everyone could feel the change in Lan Zhuing's sword momentum, and they could also see her strange eyes, but they didn't know what happened to Lan Zhuing. The sword spirit body was extremely rare, and very few people knew about it. The second sword. At this time, Lan Zhuing's eyes flickered and she said in a deep voice, "Jade sea reflects the moon. Waves devour the sky." Boom! As soon as her voice rang out, a rumbling sound rang out, and heaven and earth trembled. Terrifying sword intent filled the sky like raging sand, blotting out heaven and earth, and crushing down on Nie Tian with great force. The impact of such a terrifying sword intent was terrifying. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, but before he could make a move, he was drowned by the terrifying sword intent. Upon seeing this, everyone's expressions flickered as they sucked in a breath of cold air. Was Nie Tian going to be killed just like that? Nie Tian, you've lost. Lan Zhuing stood in the air and murmured, "You really can't block my second sword." Nie Tian was drowned by her sword intent. She absolutely didn't believe that he could survive. Is that so? However, before Lan Zhuing's voice died away, a low voice rang. Then, from the rolling clouds, a terrifying chi shot up to the sky. Then, a crimson dragon appeared and broke through the clouds. On top of the dragon stood a silhouette. It was Nie Tian. Lan Zhuing saw that Nie Tian broke through the clouds, and her blue eyes trembled in disbelief. How is this possible? Nie Tian was actually able to rush out of the layers of clouds? The crowd was stunned as well, and they couldn't react for a long time. Lan Zhuing, the second sword is over. It's time for the third sword. Nie Tian smiled faintly and stared at Lan Zhuing. Damn it! Lan Zhuing frowned. The calmness on her pretty face was instantly replaced by anger. She never thought that Nie Tian would be so terrifying. Nie Tian, you can't block my third sword. In the next second, Lan Zhuing's eyes darkened. Rays of sword intent gushed out of her, and her aura was much more violent than before. From the looks of it, Lan Zhuing was really angry. Azure Sea reflects the moon. Sea beast swallows the sky. Then, Lan Zhuing growled. The terrifying sword intent around her turned violent in an instant, as if it was going to swallow up the entire heaven and earth. The sword spirit body is really strong. Nie Tian was secretly surprised when he sensed the fluctuations in the void. However, a strange smile appeared on his face. Roar! At this moment, a low roar suddenly rang out in the air. After that, a gigantic blue beast appeared, resembling a gigantic fish dragon. Its deep blue body rolled about, causing the heavens and earth to tremble. Whoosh! In the next moment, the giant beast roared and its terrifying aura pressed down on Nie Tian like a mountain. Nie Tian's expression flickered as he sensed the oppressive power assaulting his face. Starry sky 9 limits, 5th limit, moonfall. However, in the next moment, his eyes focused and the corners of his mouth curled into a strange smile. The starry sky slashed across the sky, and a terrifying sword shadow appeared, bombarding the giant beast. This was the first time he had used the 5th limit of the starry sky 9 limits, moonfall. Previously, the 4th, 5th, and 6th limits of the starry sky 9 limits were activated at the same time. However, Nie Tian had only used the 4th limit, starfall. He had never used the 5th and 6th limits. Just now, when he was engulfed by Lan Zhuing's sword intent, he comprehended the 5th limit under such extreme circumstances. Lan Zhuing was a sword spirit body. Her sword intent was filled with the aura of the great path of heaven and earth. It contained the true meaning of the martial path and the sword path. It was not surprising that Nie Tian comprehended something under the influence of that sword intent. Boom! In the next instant, the sword shadow descended and bombarded the ice blue beast. A huge hole appeared on the body of the ice blue beast. After that, the entire body of the ice blue beast crumbled into pieces. Bang! Then, a muffled sound was heard. Under the impact of the violent force, Nie Tian's figure was pushed back thousands of meters. When he stabilized his body, a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. However, his aura did not change. It was still as strong as before. Lan Zhuing was also pushed back thousands of meters by the huge force. However, she was not injured. In the collision of the third sword, she still had the upper hand. However, at this moment, Lan Zhuing's face was extremely cold and ugly. Chapter 35:43. Chapter 35:38. Yin-Yang Twin Killers. Lan Zhuing, the third strike, is over. You've lost, Nie Tian said to Lan Zhuing from afar with a faint smile on his face. Lan Zhuing's beautiful eyes flickered with a cold light, as if she wanted to attack again. But after a long moment of hesitation, she held back. Since she had said it, she could not take it back. She had lost this battle. Nietian, if there's a chance, I would like to fight you again, Lan Zhuing said to Nietian. Sure, Nietian said with a calm smile on his face. Actually, defeating Lan Zhuing in this way was a little unfair. But Nietian felt that this was nothing. After all, he had not used his true strength. Even if they continued, he was confident that he could defeat Lan Zhuing. It was just that he would need to use up a lot of energy. Next, there were 2 more battles waiting for him. He wanted to conserve his strength. She lost just like that. The crowd was stunned for a long time before they finally reacted. Who would have thought that Lan Zhuing would lose to Nietian in such a manner? To most people, Lan Zhuing was stronger than Nietian. After all, Nietian was at a disadvantage in all 3 strikes. Lan Zhuing glanced at Nietian, and then her figure flashed as she left the arena. Next, there were 2 more battles. All eyes were on Nietian, but no one said a word. Nietian had defeated a demonic swordsman like the girl in blue. Who else could be his opponent? After a long time, the arena was still silent. No one stepped onto the arena. 5 days were about to pass. If no one challenged Nietian, he would automatically pass the Sky Wolf challenge. After witnessing Nietian's methods, anyone who wanted to enter the arena would have to think twice. Su Qing looked at Nietian and said with a faint smile, considering Nietian's strength, I'm afraid only that guy is a match for him. Brother Su, you're talking about the leader of the 9 wolves, Blind Sword Bodhi, right? Another wolf king looked at Su Cheng and asked, who else could it be other than Blind Sword? Su Cheng faintly smiled and said, unfortunately, the Blind Sword is still in seclusion. He will only appear during the Night of Wolves. If Blind Sword was here, this kid wouldn't have made it this far. The Wolf King laughed bitterly and said, now it seems that this kid basically has victory in his grasp. Blind Sword Bodhi, the leader of the Wolf Night 9 Wolves, known as the strongest genius of Wolf Night Mountain. After Nietian defeated Yin Liujia and Liang Gui, Su Cheng and the others naturally thought of Blind Sword. In their opinion, Blind Sword might be the only one who could defeat Nietian. Kid, we brothers challenge you. Do you dare to accept? At this moment, a hoarse voice resounded in the air, following which a cultivator dressed in black appeared and stared cold at Nietian. Nietian looked at that person and his eyes narrowed. That person was short and fat, and his facial features were squeezed together, making him look extremely ugly. However, his strength was not weak, and he was already at the 9th level of heavenly charm. An evil aura circulated around his body, and it was incomparably sinister. If you want to fight, just come down. Nietian became cold and said coldly, come down. Kid, we brothers have always fought together. Are you willing to accept our challenge? The stout martialist didn't speak, but another voice rang out. A tall and thin man appeared in midair. Nietian's eyes widened as he looked at the man. This man was tall and thin, but his aura was very similar to that of the stout martialist. However, there were still some differences, as if the same force had been divided into 2 parts. Although there was a huge difference in their stature, their appearances were very similar. 2 people? Nietian frowned and couldn't help but smile. These 2 guys wanted to challenge him at the same time, 2 against 1. Yes. The 2 nodded in unison, and their eyes flickered coldly. These 2 are the Yin-Yang Calamity. At this moment, Su Cheng's eyes flickered as he recognized the 2 martialists. Yin-Yang twin evils. The eyes of the other 2 wolf kings quivered. They were both stunned, and their expressions were extremely shocked. They are the Yin-Yang Calamity. On the other side, Huang Lang's eyes flickered, and he also exclaimed, Yin-Yang Calamity. At this moment, the crowd reacted and exclaimed in unison. Their faces were filled with panic, as if they had seen something terrifying. Nietian glanced around and couldn't help but frown. It seemed that these 2 brothers, one tall and one short, were quite famous. That's right, we are the Yin-Yang Calamity. The 2 looked at the crowd and said in an extremely arrogant manner. Nietian's face sank after seeing this. Following this, he heard the crowd, discussing among themselves. They are the yin-yang calamity. Rumor has it that these two are extremely cruel. They practice some kind of evil skill that allows them to steal the yin and yang qi from young boys and girls. Yeah, I heard that these two have killed hundreds of thousands of young boys and girls. Hundreds of thousands? You are underestimating them. I heard that they have killed millions of young boys and girls. These two are so cruel and weak. How did they survive until now? Don't you know? They have a powerful teacher called the yin-yang old man, who came from the upper paradise. As the crowd spoke, they looked at the yin-yang calamity with even more fear. Tian squinted his eyes and looked at the yin-yang calamity without any fear. Instead, his eyes were extremely gloomy and filled with killing intent. Kid, are you willing to fight us brothers? At this moment, the short and fat Insha sneered and asked provocatively. No way. Before Tian could speak, Su Cheng's voice was heard. He said loudly, the sky-picking wolf has always been a one-on-one fight. There has never been a two-on-one fight. Not in the past, but we can now. The skinny Insha smirked and looked at Su Cheng. Lord Wolf King, let us brothers fight together. One fight counts as two, all right? Of course not. Su Cheng's eyes darkened as he rejected the offer cold. Tian had already come this far. It was too dangerous to fight the yin-yang calamity at the same time. There was no need to take the risk. Can't we? Insha frowned, and a strange smile appeared on his face. He said, if you can't, we brothers will have to do something unsightly today. Huh? Su Cheng's face darkened. He did not expect the yin-yang calamity to threaten him. You all know that the yin-yang calamity can steal the yin and yang qi of young boys and girls. However, you have only heard of it and have never seen it. Why don't I show you today? Insha smirked and suddenly stretched out his palm. Suddenly, a space-time aura surged out and 7 or 8 children appeared. It seemed that he had opened some kind of space-time artifact and let these children out. The crowd's eyes trembled and they could not help but gasp in shock. Chapter 35:44. Chapter 35:39. You deserve to die. Why, I want my mother. After the children appeared, they immediately started crying pitifully. Listen, these little dolls are crying so pitifully. Insha looked at the children and smiled coldly. Then he picked up a little girl and released a wave of baleful yin-shi that enveloped the little girl. Then, a shocking scene happened. The little girl struggled a few times, but before she could even scream, she turned into a pile of bones. Everyone's eyes trembled. They were completely shocked by the scene in front of them. They sucked in a mouthful of cold air and felt a chill run down their spine. Insha was simply too cruel. He actually took the life of a little girl just like that. However, everyone could only watch helplessly. No one made a move. Everyone knew the origin of the yin-yang double demons. The yin-yang old man behind them was simply too terrifying. He was an expert that stood at the peak of the 7th sacred world of cultivators. Su Cheng frowned and his expression turned cold. However, he did not say anything and only watched coldly. He did not expect the yin-yang double demons to be so despicable. They used such a method to force Tian to accept the challenge. At this time, Insha looked at Tian and asked with a cold smile, Brat, do you want to accept the challenge or watch these little dolls die in front of you? He did not notice that Tian's eyes were extremely cold, and his killing intent was on the verge of going berserk. Yang Sha looked at Tian and asked, Brat, do you dare to accept the challenge? You deserve to die. Tian's eyes were filled with killing intent as he spoke word by word. Looks like you've accepted the challenge. The yin-yang double demons chuckled. Then, Insha put away the children. At this time, Tian's eyes sank, and he said cold, Before we fight, I want you to hand over those children. The scene just now made him completely furious. He did not make a move yet because he was worried about the safety of those children. All right, Insha chuckled and directly agreed. Then, a gourd-like object appeared in his hand. He threw it to Su Cheng and said, Lord Wolf King, please help us look after these children. These children are things that Lord Teacher needs. Nothing can happen to them. Su Cheng took the item. His eyes were extremely gloomy, and he didn't say anything. The Yin Fiend had said this on purpose, obviously using the Yin-Yang Old Man to threaten him. Old Man Yin-Yang's reputation in the seventh sacred cultivator of true cultivators was simply too great. He had once destroyed several first-rate sects in the seventh sacred cultivator of true cultivators by himself. Even evil Moon Tianlang would not want to offend such a cultivator unless he had no other choice. The Yin-Yang twin ghosts were very confident that as long as Nie Tian dared to fight with them, he would definitely die. Nie Tian, have you thought it through? Su Qing looked at Nie Tian and asked. As long as Nie Tian refused to accept the challenge, no one could force him. After all, these children that were captured by the Yin-Yang double ghosts had nothing to do with him. You've thought it through very clearly. Nie Tian's eyes were as cold as ice. All right. Su Chang frowned, nodded, and said, this is the last battle, the last 2 matches. Has Nie Tian gone crazy? The crowd's eyes trembled and their expressions changed. They didn't expect Nie Tian to actually accept the challenge of the Yin-Yang twin ghosts. Could Nie Tian really win against the Yin-Yang twin ghosts at the same time? More importantly, the Yin-Yang twin ghosts had the Yin-Yang Old Man behind them. Even if Nie Tian was strong enough, would he dare to kill these 2 people? Brat, you're dead. At this moment, the Yin Fiend took a step forward. His eyes were ice cold as he said, Brat, our Yin-Yang twin ghost can instantly kill a cultivator at the 5th level of the Heavenly Mandate Realm. Can your strength surpass that of a cultivator at the 5th level of the Heavenly Mandate Realm? The Yin Fiend chuckled, and his entire body began to release violent Yang Fiend Qi. The Yin-Yang twin ghosts absorbed the extreme Yin Qi of the young girl and the extreme Yang Qi of the young boy. They used these 2 powers to cultivate and continuously strengthen their martial bodies. Either of these 2 people had strength comparable to Yin, Liujia, and the others. The 2 of them had once killed a cultivator at the 5th level of the Heavenly Mandate Realm. Nie Tian was just a cultivator at the 2nd level of the Heavenly Mandate Realm. Of course, they didn't take him seriously. In fact, they were just passing by the Wolf's Night Mountain. When they heard about the Sky Wolf Challenge and the huge bet, they couldn't help but make their move. You're dead. Nie Tian's eyes were filled with killing intent. His eyes trembled slightly, and a terrifying eye power was slowly released. Don't give him a chance. Just kill him. The Yin Fiend frowned. He felt the eye power fluctuation in Nie Tian's eyes. He had a bad feeling and suddenly turned to the Yang Fiend. All right, the Yang Fiend agreed. His Yang Fiend Qi surged to the extreme, making him look like an extremely dense dark cloud. It was extremely terrifying. At the same time, the Yin Fiend began to release his Yang Fiend Qi. The aura of the 2 merged perfectly. The void was covered by a terrifying darkness, as if it had fallen into an eternal night. Die. In the next second, the Yin-Yang double evils roared at the same time. Instantly, a terrifying black light was released. A bloody and violent aura covered the sky and earth as it rushed towards Nie Tian. So scary. The crowd's eyes trembled as they exclaimed. They felt like their bodies were about to be torn apart under the pressure of the Yang double evils. Boom! After that, the entire arena was enveloped by a monstrous black light, and it was extremely terrifying. Nie Tian sensed that the murderous aura in the air was like an invisible hand that was trying to trap him. Boom! Lin Fan's eyes narrowed and his body trembled. His eyes turned pitch black in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the celestial demon body was activated. Facing the Yin-Yang double evils, Nie Tian had to activate the celestial demon body. Since this was the last battle, there was no need for him to hold back any longer. In the next second, Nie Tian's figure moved like a ray of light. The celestial demon body's aura soared into the sky as he charged forward. He was like a sharp blade that sliced through the darkness. Wherever his figure passed, the Yin-Yang double evil's Qi would be destroyed. The Yin-Yang double evils saw Nie Tian charging towards them, and their eyes widened in fear. They could feel death looming over them. Die! At this time, Nie Tian let out a low roar, and his figure appeared in front of the Yin-Yang double evils. Both his hands stretched out at the same time. Like 2 iron chains, they clamped down on the Yang Double Evil's necks. Kid, you can't. The sudden change of events caused the Yang Double Evils to be extremely shocked. Enduring the intense pain, they struggled to speak. Bang! Bang! However, Niet Tian did not give them the chance to finish their sentence. He exerted force with both his hands, and with two muffled sounds, blood splattered in front of him. The Yin-Yang Double Evil's heads were crushed by Niet Tian. They died instantly. At this time, the Yin-Yang Double Evil's chi that filled the sky dissipated. When the crowd saw the two headless corpses in Niet Tian's hands, their eyes trembled violently. Not only did Niet Tian kill the Yin-Yang Double Evils, but he did it in the most direct way. It was too cruel. Niet Tian used an even crueler method to deal with those who were cruel and merciless. Just as the crowd was petrified, Niet Tian suddenly felt something. He exclaimed in surprise, and his expression changed. In the next moment, two black vortexes appeared from the Yin-Yang Double Evil's corpses. The Yin-Yang Double Evil's chi was extremely strong. Chapter 35:45. Yin and Yang. Upon hearing the Ghost Emperor's voice, Niet Tian's eyes flickered with astonishment. Evil essence. He didn't know what evil energy was, but he could feel that the two black vortexes contained an extremely dense evil energy. One Yin and one Yang. Their auras complemented each other. It was incomparably strange. Phew! At that moment, before Niet Tian could react, the two black vortexes swooped down on him and disappeared into his right eye in the blink of an eye. In an instant, a terrifying force surged out from the demon eye and instantly attacked Niet Tian's body, causing him to scream in pain. The intense pain felt like his body was being torn apart bit by bit. Moreover, the evil energy was like ants, biting his body like a raging fire. Niet Tian. The sudden change caused the Ghost Emperor to be stunned for a moment and couldn't help but cry out in fear. He didn't expect that the two evil energies would actually rush into Niet Tian's eyes. What's going on? The crowd trembled when they saw Niet Tian's appearance. They were incomparably shocked, and their expressions changed, not knowing what had happened. However, the two evil energies' auras made everyone feel suffocated. It was hard to imagine how painful it would be to have two evil energies rush into Niet Tian's eyes. Niet Tian. Teacher. At this moment, two voices resounded. It was Su Kuanga and Duanmu Lu. Their figures moved at the same time and appeared in the sky above the battle arena. Niet Tian had killed the Yin-Yang twin evils and ended the battle with the sky-picking wolf. He had already won. However, when Su Kuanga and Duanmu Lu wanted to approach Niet Tian, they felt an incomparably dense evil energy, preventing them from approaching. There seemed to be an evil energy barrier in the air, preventing anyone from approaching Niet Tian. Teacher. However, Duanmu Lu didn't care at this moment. He let out a low roar and directly rushed forward. Boom! As he approached, a gust of murderous aura suddenly appeared in the void and swept towards him like storm. Duanmu Lu felt a suffocating pressure, and his expression changed. Danger! Su Kuanga's eyes trembled as he shouted in a low voice. His figure moved as he fiercely thrusted his spear forward. The spear was like a dragon, and wherever the spear's shadow landed, it directly dispersed the evil chi. However, under the impact of the baleful chi, Su Kuanga's figure retreated several hundred meters away. After stabilizing his body, a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. He was unexpectedly injured. That baleful aura was extremely powerful. It could actually directly injure Su Kuanga. Duanmu Lu retreated hastily. His eyes were trembling, and he was momentarily speechless. It was very thrilling just now. If Su Kuanga was a little bit slower, he would have died without a doubt. Even Su Kuanga was injured by that evil chi. If it landed on his body, he would definitely die. Duanmu, don't go near Niet Tian. Su Kuanga looked at Duanmu Lu and shouted, Kuanga, quickly retreat from the battle stage. At this time, Su Cheng's figure appeared and shouted. Su Kuanga complied and left the battle stage together with Duanmu Lu. The two of them looked at Niet Tian, their eyes slightly trembling. They didn't know what happened to Nye Tian's body. Lord Wolf King, what happened to Nye Tian? Su Kuanga looked at Su Cheng, hesitated for a moment, and couldn't help but ask. Some kind of power from the yin-yang dual evils seemed to have been absorbed by Nye Tian's eyes. Su Cheng frowned and guessed. He also couldn't understand what happened to Nye Tian's body. If Nye Tian could really directly absorb the power of other warriors, it would be too abnormal. Among the warriors, those who cultivated evil cultivation methods could indeed devour the power of others, but that kind of devouring was extremely limited. Moreover, when devouring, the warriors would also have to pay a corresponding price. At this moment, the two dark vortexes that gushed out from the yin-yang dual evil's body directly merged with Nye Tian. It was too strange. This kid, what happened to him? The crowd looked at Nye Tian. They were horrified and shocked. At this time, Nye Tian looked very terrifying. His whole body was shrouded by a powerful evil qi. His figure could no longer be seen. Only a terrifying evil qi vortex could be seen. What was even more frightening was that in that terrible evil qi vortex, two extremely terrifying auras gushed out. It was the power of yin and yang. The two forces collided with each other, causing the void to tremble. Waves of evil qi violently attacked the void. It was as if thousands of demons were wildly dancing. The crowd felt the strong evil qi and couldn't help but retreat. It seemed that the yin-yang evil qi on Nye Tian's body had released an even more terrifying power. At this time, in the center of the evil qi vortex, Nye Tian's body was undergoing a shocking change. To be more precise, his right demonic eye was undergoing some sort of terrifying mutation. At this time, the extreme demon annihilation seal appeared at the corner of his eye again. And it wasn't just one, but three. That's right. 3 extreme demon annihilation seals. Previously, the demon eye only had 1 extreme demon annihilation seal, but now he had 3 extreme demon annihilation seals. The 3 extreme demon annihilation seals were like 3 frightening black lines that were engraved at the corner of Nye Tian's eye, making him look incomparably evil. As for his martial body, under the impact of the yin-yang evil qi, it was almost torn apart. The power released by the yin-yang evil qi was extremely terrifying. It made Nye Tian feel as if his body was being torn apart by thousands of sharp blades. That kind of pain was indescribable. However, at the same time, he felt that the power of his martial body had clearly increased. His entire body was filled with a sense of power. Nye Tian, hold on. At this time, the Ghost Emperor's worried voice rang out. There was a hint of excitement. Of course, he knew that Nye Tian's demon eye was currently fusing with the yin-yang evil qi. It was precisely because of the impact of the yin-yang evil qi that Nye Tian's demon eye had once again awakened the extreme demon annihilation seal. Furthermore, it had directly awakened 2 extreme demon annihilation seals. As long as Nye Tian could endure it and successfully fuse with the yin-yang evil qi, his strength would have a qualitative leap. Nye Tian nodded his head. Although the pain in his body almost made him faint, the feeling of his martial body surging with power made him extremely excited. What he needed the most was to increase his strength. As long as he could increase his strength, he could endure even greater pain. Following that, the tearing pain lasted for a full hour. This short period of time made Nye Tian feel as if a few centuries had passed. Fortunately, after an hour, the intense pain gradually weakened and soon disappeared. The endless evil qi in the void instantly flowed into Nye Tian's demon eye. The void was clear, as if the baleful aura had never existed. Everyone was flabbergasted by the bizarre change. They looked at Nye Tian with confused expressions, not knowing what was going on. Could it be that those 2 terrifying black vortexes had been absorbed by Nye Tian? Nye Tian's aura was much stronger than before. What was going on? Chapter 3546. Soaring heroic spirit in the wolf-slave field. Everyone's eyes were focused on Nye Tian, shocked and puzzled. Very good. At this time, Under everyone's gaze, Nyetian opened his mouth and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly as he murmured to himself. After more than an hour of torture, he successfully merged the yin and yang evil yuan. At this time, he felt that the power of the demon I was much stronger than before. More importantly, he had awakened 3 extreme demon annihilation seals. And under the impact of the demon eye's power, his martial body had also been greatly enhanced, becoming even more powerful than before. What made him even more surprised was that his strength had once again broken through from the 2nd level of Heavenly Charm to the 3rd level of Heavenly Charm. A small breakthrough wasn't considered big, but one should know that he had just broken through to the 2nd level of Heavenly Charm not long ago. Breaking through so quickly at the Heavenly Charm realm was simply unimaginable. Nyetian, he broke through again. Su Kuanga looked at Nyetian with a trembling gaze. The shock in his heart was indescribable. When he fought with Nyetian, the latter was only at the 1st level of Heavenly Charm. In less than a month, Nyetian actually broke through 2 levels. This speed was really terrifying. The Heavenly Charm realm was the initial stage of the Sage realm. For those who had set foot in the Heavenly Charm realm, it wasn't difficult to break through. But even a genius martial artist would need several years or even decades to break through 1 level. For someone like Nyetian to break through 2 levels in a month was too abnormal. At this time, everyone also felt the change in Nyetian's aura. Their eyes trembled in shock. Unbelievable. Nyetian actually merged the yin and yang evil yuan. Lord Wolf King, is the Sky Wolf Challenge over? At this time, Nyetian looked at Su Cheng and asked with a faint smile. It's over. Su Cheng's eyes slightly narrowed as he reacted and nodded. Just now, everyone was shocked by the sudden change. Only now did they realize that the Sky Wolf Challenge was over. No one thought that Nyetian would actually succeed in the Sky Wolf Challenge. A 2nd-level Heavenly Charm martial artist defeating so many 9th-level Heavenly Charm martial artists was simply too terrifying. Nyetian didn't pay attention to the crowd. His figure moved and directly left the stage. He arrived beside Su Cheng and said, Lord Wolf King, I want to take my friend away. No problem. Su Cheng glanced at Duanmu Lu and said with a faint smile. Before challenging the Heavenly Wolf, he had already promised Nyetian that as long as Nyetian succeeded, he could take Duanmu Lu away. Aside from Duanmu, there are 3 other people. Nyetian's lips twitched as he spoke. Su Cheng stared blankly at Nyetian. He had only agreed to let Nyetian take away Duanmu Lu, not the others. Nyetian, don't think that you can take away anyone from the Wolf Slave Farm just because you succeeded in challenging the Sky Wolf Challenge. At this moment, another Wolf King took a step forward and stared at Nyetian with a cold expression. Every wolf slave here belongs to the Wolf Slave Farm. How can anyone take them away? Half. Nyetian looked at the Wolf King and said in a deep voice, Huh? The Wolf King was stunned. He didn't understand what Nyetian was talking about. Is half of the Sky Wolf Challenge enough? Nyetian looked at the Wolf King and said cold. What did you say? The Wolf King looked at Nyetian and suddenly realized something. Its pupils constricted and it asked in shock. He couldn't believe his ears. If he didn't hear wrong, Nyetian actually wanted to use half of the Sky Wolf Challenge to exchange for the other 3. I still have 3 friends in the Wolf Slave Farm. I am willing to use half of the Sky Wolf Challenge to exchange for the other 3, Nyetian said calmly and clearly. His voice wasn't loud, but when it fell on the Wolf Slave Farm, it stunned the hundreds of thousands of people present. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Nyetian. Their expressions were clearly saying, Are you crazy? Using half of the Sky Wolf Challenge to exchange for 3 wolf slaves? In anyone's opinion, this was crazy. The price of the wolf slaves in the Wolf Slave Farm was very high. Even with ordinary strength and talent, it would cost hundreds or even thousands of top-grade Saint crystals. However, the Heavenly Wolf stakes accumulated by the Heavenly Wolf Challenge this time around was unimaginably high. At this time, the Sky Wolf Challenge had already been calculated. There were more than 60 million top-grade Saint crystals. In addition, there were countless saint pills, sacred arrays, sacred artifacts, martial arts, martial skills, and many other things. When everything was added up, it was probably comparable to the Chamber of Commerce in 7th Cultivator's Sacred World. Even the 7 Cultivator's Sacred World's branch of 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce would find it difficult to come up with so much money at once. But Nyetian actually wanted to use half of the Sky Wolf Challenge to exchange for 3 wolf slaves. If this wasn't crazy, then what was? Just 30 million top-grade Saint Crystals was enough to buy tens of thousands of wolf slaves from the wolf slave farm. Nyetian, are you kidding me? After a few seconds of stunned silence, the wolf slave reacted and asked with blazing eyes. He was the Wolf King, but in the face of so much wealth, he couldn't help feeling a little nervous. Do I look like I'm joking? Nyetian's face was gloomy as he glanced over at the Wolf King before turning to Su Cheng and saying, "Sir Wolf King, please return those people to me." Su Cheng's eyes flickered and he nodded. Even he was shocked at this moment. It had to be said that Nyetian was truly heroic, offering half of the Sky Wolf Challenge as soon as he opened his mouth. The most important thing was that Nyetian remained calm, as if money was nothing more than waste paper to him. When a cultivator's strength reached a certain level, the temptation for money would become less and less, but once the amount of money reached a certain level, it would still tempt masters. Nyetan, however, was different from the others and was not tempted at all. His strength was not strong, but having such a mentality was enough to show that his goal was very high, so high that he didn't care about the Sky Wolf Challenge at all. In Yetian's eyes, no amount of money meant anything. The most important thing was that Duanmu Lu and the others were alive. However, he directly offered half of the Sky Wolf Challenge to thank Su Cheng for his help. If not for the latter, he would not have been able to rescue them so smoothly. A moment later, the people from the wolf slave farm brought Yang Zixiao, Han Tian, and Peng Xiongfei over. "Teacher," when the 3 saw Nye Tian, they trembled and called out in unison, "It's all right." Nye Tian faintly smiled. His divine sense swept over the 3's bodies and confirmed that they were all right. Only then did he feel a lot more relieved. Next, Nye Tian did not stay any longer. After the people from the wolf slave farm returned the other half of the Sky Wolf Challenge to him, he and Su Kuanga left with Duanmu Lu and the others. Everyone's eyes watched as Nye Tian and the others left. The shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. Nye Tian's performance in challenging the Sky Wolf Challenge was enough to shock everyone. After today, the name Nye Tian would spread throughout the entire 7 Cultivators' Sacred World.